Hello and welcome back everyone, we Weeb Online, and today I'm gonna start a new series, What If Naruto Was the Child of Demons. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
On the eve of Tenchi and Ayaka's nuptials, Sasami, Washu, and Ryoko were enjoying tea in the living room while Ayaka stormed the house, yelling that nothing had been done. As she gazed at her now teenage sister and the other two women, Ayaka complained, "How can you three be so lazy?" Ryoko gave the woman with the purple hair in front of her a languid eyebrow raise. While Ryo-Oki played with her tail, she said, "We are just taking a break from decorating for your wedding." Sasami had just poured them the fresh tea she had brewed, and they had only been sitting down for 10 minutes when she bit Ayaka, saying, "I have seen you three do for the last hour is just sit there watching TV." Sasami grinned at her sister and said, "Ayaka, why don't you go look out back?" To this, Ayaka arched an eyebrow. As she approached the doubled porch doors, she asked, "Why should I have to go look out back?" She noticed a beautiful white wedding setup outside, complete with lights, chairs, and a white runner so she wouldn't have to walk on the grass on her way to Tenchi. She and Tenchi could stand on a tiny white stage. It was breathtakingly beautiful, however, it was insufficient for Ayaka. There was room for improvement. The royal statues of her and Tenchi didn't belong there. "It looks horrible. Do you really expect me to get married out there with all that?" Ayaka exclaimed, her face flushed with rage. The three women exchanged shocked glances. They had put in a lot of effort throughout the day, and Ryo-Oki even volunteered her chibi form to help. Washu asked, growing agitated, "Ayaka, what is wrong with you?" She was usually so calm and easygoing that she didn't give a damn about what other people thought of her. However, this was going too far. Because Sasami had worked so hard to ensure that her big sister's wedding would be an unforgettable event. Ayaka turned and gave them a fierce look. She walked over to them, glaring more at Sasami, and said, "What? It looks like Ryo-Oki did all the work while you three did nothing." She turned away from her sister and started to leave, saying, "Sasami, I would have expected better from you. You are a princess of Jirai and know how weddings are very important they are to our family." Sasami got to her feet, glaring back at her older sister as tears started to fall down her cheeks. "If you don't like it, Ayaka, then get off your fat and lazy ass and do it yourself. For I am done. I will not be making the food for your wedding. So I do suggest you go into that kitchen right now and get cooking, for you have mother, father, and auntie and the others to cook for," she said to Ayaka as she fled past a stupefied Ayaka. Washu and Ryoko followed Sasami, with Ryo-Oki perched on Ryoko's shoulder. Ayaka yelled, "Go ahead and leave. I don't need any of you good-for-nothing ingrates," before rushing into the kitchen to start preparing the wedding dinner. Washu's laboratory. As she paced Washu's lab, Sasami sobbed, "I can't believe she said that. We worked so hard to make sure tomorrow would be perfect for her and Tenchi, and all she does is complain that it looks horrible." Ryoko took a sip from her sake jug and remarked, "She has always been that way. Always ungrateful and stuck up. I honestly thought her marrying Tenchi would have changed things. But I guess I was wrong." Washu sighed as he glanced at the two angry women. "I don't think things will get any better once they are married either. Ayaka has been asking if I was planning on moving out once they got married, for they needed all the space they could get. So when they have children," she informed them. Ryoko's face also darkened. "She asked me the same question and told me to move back into the cave I was sealed in. They were told." Sasami's expression was dejected. "She asked me if I would be her nanny and cook for when she had her children," she informed them. The other two were taken aback. Sasami was informed that she had to meet her suitors soon, so they assumed she would either return to Jirai or go to Tokyo to study. "She is turning you into the help," Ryoko said, looking shocked. "That's horrible. Maybe we should just leave this place and let her learn the hard way that we did help her out a lot. That it wasn't just her doing all the work around this place," she said to the others. Ryo-Oki nodded her head in agreement and said, "Meow." Sasami, who didn't want to part from her soon-to-be brother-in-law with the demon her sister had turned into, said sadly, "But I couldn't do that to Tenchi. I think it would be for the best if we left the newlyweds. For they don't need us around. Ayaka has made it clear to us. She only wants you as a servant, and if that is what she wants, then your parents could give her those, or she can learn to be a housewife, for we all know she will fail sooner or later." Washu was packing up her laboratory while talking to them. Ryoko smiled. "Ma, I like your idea. It would be nice to travel once more, and now that I have all my gems back, there isn't anything holding me back anymore. Tenchi made it very clear when he chose Ayaka over me that night. She said with a tear streaming down her face. He had broken her heart, and it hurt a lot to see him embrace and kiss Ayaka while she talked endlessly about their upcoming future. Sasami was a little taken aback by this and asked, "Are you two really going to leave?" As she glanced at Sasami, Washu said, "Yes." She said to the girl, "I think it would be for the best you came with us." Sasami gave a nod. It would be nice to travel without Ayaka always telling me what to do or where we are going, she stated to the others. As the others departed to pack, Washu said, "Then it is settled. We will leave at midnight after everyone has gone to sleep." The three had gathered their belongings and packed without anyone noticing. They simply believed that they were clearing out space for the guest who would be arriving in the morning and putting things away. Not even realizing that her sister and the others had left a note on the table for her to read in the morning, Ayaka spent half the night cooking. The three had already arrived at a clearing close to the Masaki shrine at midnight. Unexpectedly, though, Yosho in his younger form was standing there. As Yosho glanced at the three in front of him and the young Ryo-oki, he remarked, "It is a beautiful night, ladies." His eyes were knowing as he asked, "What brings you out this late?" He heard what Ayaka had told them about their diligence while he was outside the house. Sasami let out a sigh while wearing a dejected expression. "We are leaving. Ayaka doesn't want us around, and if she does, she only wants us around as servants, and that isn't something I want for myself or for the others. I want to find love and adventure out there. I feel like I have been in Ayaka's shadow for way too long," she said with a tearful grin. Yosho gave his little half-sister a smile. "I understand what you are talking about. Why do you think I left when I did? I just used Ryoko as a way out. I didn't want to be saddled with what our father wanted for me. I didn't love the girl he wanted me to marry, even though she loved me," he stated. Ryoko snorted because she couldn't hold it against him for running like he did, since everyone knew that Ayaka was the woman he was going to marry. "I'm glad I gave you that way out, for I don't think that marriage between you two would have worked out," she replied with a grin. Yosho looked at Washu and Sasami and grinned slightly. "I believe you are right. For Ayaka and I walk two different paths, and I do hope she and my grandson have a long and happy life together. For I am not sure if this marriage would be blessed by the goddess." He was aware of their secrets. Yes, they all did. However, nobody ever really mentioned it. It was a sensitive topic for Sasami. She simply didn't care about Washu. Until she was needed and Sasami developed her new abilities, she would let her third sister take care of things. The girl would be trained by her. Washu smiled and said, "Tokimi, I know will frown on their union, for it wasn't one she had her hand in. If she hadn't been acting like such a spoiled brat, I would have blessed it," Yosho said, laughing. "Our time is being wasted. The sooner we depart." As Ryoko threw Ryo-oki into the air and changed into a huge spaceship with a ruby-covered dome and black and brown interior, she said, "the better chance we have that no one will come looking for us." "All right." Yosho turned back into an elderly man and waved them away, saying, "Have a safe trip, ladies, and may the three goddesses guide you in your journey." The three disappeared into the spaceship and, with a loud meow, disappeared in an instant. When Yosho disappeared back into the darkness and discovered Tenchi standing there holding the letter, he said, "I pray you three find love and happiness out there. Let them go, boy." After saying, "It's for the best," he returned to his shrine. Tenchi, who didn't want to lose three people, said, "But Grandpa, you have chosen your new life with Ayaka," the shrine's doors said. Yosho slammed the sliding door shut and said, "Now let them begin their new lives without you two." His father had just arrived from Tokyo on the midnight train, so Tenchi let his head drop and walked slowly back to his house. Beyond space. Where are we heading? Ryoko wanted to go somewhere new, somewhere she had never been before, so she asked. After taking out her computer, Washu typed some text and displayed a sizable map in front of everyone. "Well," Sasami nodded her head as she told the two, "we have been to all these places and we want to go somewhere where no one from Jirai would come and find us." Sasami, who was now even more offended by her sister's actions, said, "I don't want Ayaka coming after me to drag me back home with her or our parents coming for me and ordering me to go help her." Tokimi was the only person in front of them. "Hello sisters and niece," she said to the three. "Tokimi, what brought you here?" Washu asked, not even bothering to glance up at her sister. Looking at her older sister, Sasami transformed into Tsunami and said, "Sister, why do you grace us with your appearance?" Now that Washu had transformed into a goddess so she wouldn't be left out, she inquired. "I think you three would do well in a young, new world," Tokimi said with a sly smile. "The demon wars have just ended, and the shinobi era is rapidly approaching, a different world than the one we come from or are accustomed to. I think all three of you would succeed there," she said. "Shinobi," Ryoko raised an eyebrow in response to your question. Young Ryoko, "Yes, ninja or shinobi, I think it would be fun to play with them and go on exciting adventures with them." Tokimi grinned and said, "It would be a change for you three." "What's the catch?" Washu narrowed her eyes at her sister and asked, knowing that Tokimi wouldn't come to her out of pure kindness to tell her about a new world. "Oh, Washu, can't I do my family a favor?" Tokimi asked. "She's got a point. You never act kindly from the bottom of your heart," Ryoko remarked, sensing that something was wrong. "Tell us, sister," Tsunami said, narrowing her eyes. "What is the cause of this?" She questioned her sister. Tokimi sighed and turned to face her family, grinning subtly. "The child of light has a prophecy. Unless you, Tsunami, travel to this world to the elemental nations and wed the head of the Uzumaki clan, that child will not be born," she informed her youngest sister. Even Washu was taken aback when Tsunami turned to face Tokimi. "What are you discussing?" Washu asked, staring at Tokimi in disbelief. "A child will be born at a very difficult moment." A sad expression adorned Tokimi's lovely face as she spoke. "There will come a time when the world will need a true hero to save them from the darkness that will befall them from the rabid goddess of the false moon." "The rabid goddess of the false moon? What do you mean?" As Ryoko's silver hair grew as long as Washu's and the three jewels appeared in a triangle on her forehead, the goddess blood began to slowly awaken around the three goddesses in front of her. She was a young goddess who plundered a forbidden fruit from one of their planet's sacred trees. After consuming it, she gained extraordinary abilities known as chakra. However, she became obsessed with power, and when she transformed into a 10-tailed beast determined to wipe out the world, her two sons took action and sealed her away. As he awakened the chakra in every human on the planet, her oldest son traveled the world while sealing the beast inside of him, wishing for them to become more resilient and capable of caring for themselves. The shinobi were raised as a result of this. "But I'm getting ahead of myself," Tokimi remarked, glancing at everyone. Then, using the 10 tails, her oldest son produced a 9-tailed beast. Tokimi stated, "While his two sons are vying for his throne, his third son is content to assist the tailed beast in finding new homes where they can live in peace and be their keepers if they choose to stay with them." "How is the youngest son doing?" Tsunami asked, glancing at her sister. "He went to the moon to become his mother's keeper," Tokimi said with a smile. "He and his kids will keep an eye on her for the rest of their lives." Tokimi said, "I'm making sure she never escapes her prison. You want Sasami to travel to this planet where the people live, known as the elemental nations, in order to locate the husband you have found for her. Because she will be the mother or grandmother of this child of the light, about which you claim there is a protocol." Ryoko, who was now a little irritated, asked. "Yes, my dear niece," Tokimi said, glancing at her niece. "I'm saying that," she said to Ryoko. Washu simply chuckled and said, "That is rich, Tokimi. We should do it," Tsunami said as she sat quietly and gazed down at Sasami and the small pond in front of her. "For us, a new home and a new world. A place where we can be content. I want to do this, Tsunami. We will be together when I'm older, and I want to be content and know that I made the right decision. You once told me that I was destined for great things. So please, let's do this," Sasami said, grinning at her older self while looking up at Tsunami. "We'll carry it out. Sasami wants to do it," Tsunami said, drawing everyone's attention with a gentle smile. "All right," Ryoko laughed and said, "I get to be a ninja now." As Tokimi handed them the coordinates to open the wormhole Ryo-Oki flew into when she disappeared from the ship, Washu observed her younger sister and her older sister and grinned, saying, "Fine, let's do it. Fundamental nations. This will be my home and where my clan will grow." Ryu Uzumaki, a young man, stood on his island and gazed at the others who had followed him. Land of a whirlpools. Like his father, Ryu has long crimson hair and violet eyes with rings and tones. Unlike his brother, he was built differently, with a tall, athletic figure and an ox-like strength. Several women have tried to get his eyes, but none have succeeded. He asked himself, "When will I find my bride?" as they all started to construct and labor diligently to create this island with surrounding whirlpools to protect it from outside threats. Ryo-Oki transformed back into herself and leapt onto Sasami's shoulder as they started to walk to where they could hear people talking and building. A spaceship landed in the forest surrounding the new and young village of Uzu, and the three women got out and removed their belongings while Washu learned about this chakra and opened their networks so they know how to use it. We are supposed to meet Sasami's future husband here, then. Ryoko smiled at the teenage girl and teased her. Ryoko, please. Sasami, who was trembling a little, said, I am already anxious enough about meeting this man that Tokimi wants me to meet. Washu smiles as he looks at the two and says, Ryoko, and everything will be alright. Until we locate this Uzumaki that Tokimi wants Sasami to meet, no flirting with anyone, she instructed her daughter. You've got it. I don't think I need a bed partner or a boyfriend at this time. After their journey there, Ryoko said, I just need to grow and learn more about these shinobis. Ryoko mostly floated as they walked for what seemed like 3 hours, but it was actually more than an hour and a half. I believe you should cease floating so much, Ryoko. As she worried about her careless daughter, Washu said, they are not used to seeing things like that, and we don't need people calling you a demon or other things like they did back on Earth. As Ryoko landed, she said, yeah, alright. They heard rustling coming from the nearby tree line, and they all looked at it, unsure if it was a human or an animal. Suddenly, a man with red hair broke through the tree line, dragging a wild boar tied to a rope in his right hand and carrying it on his shoulder. He heard two women conversing, so he stopped and looked up from the ground. His violet eyes met bright pink ones, and Sasami blushed slightly at the man with the red hair. Her large pink eyes and long teal hair made her a beautiful sight, and Ryu's violet eyes blushed softly as he looked at her. Hello. He said. Sasami gave him a gentle smile and said, hello. Are you lost? Ryu asked, maintaining eye contact with Sasami. Yes, we are, Sasami said with a gentle smile as she pushed a loose teal hair behind her ear with her right hand. Ryu smiled shyly at Sasami and said, allow me to show you to my village. Washu observed the two, wondering if this was the young man Sasami was supposed to meet, while Ryoko stood behind, grinning broadly like the cat that ate the canary. After giving Sasami another glance, he says, May I know the name of the lovely maiden before me? My name is Sasami Jirai, Sasami said, flushed. Please tell me your name, sir. She questioned him. My name is Ryu Uzumaki and Uzukage of the Uzu no Kuni, also known as the Land of Whirlpool, he said with an even bigger smile. He informed her, we are a young shinobi village. When Sasami and the others learn that his last name is Uzumaki, their eyes enlarge, they have discovered the man Sasami was destined to be with. It appears that this man will provide her with all the love she could ever need and desire, which made Sasami Tsunami smile because her younger self had found happiness before they became one. Time jump. Washu and Ryoko were standing behind Ryu and his troops, while Sasami Tsunami was standing to his right. In the morning, troops from Kumo, Iwa, and Kiri will arrive. Glancing over his shoulder at Ryoko, who nodded and disappeared from view, Ryu declared, I want all the children and women and those who are unable to fight to be put on all the ships and sent to the Land of Fire Tower's sister village. My love, Ryu, Sasami Tsunami, who didn't want to lose her husband, said, we will stand with you until the bitter end. Earlier that day, they had lost their son, the second Uzukage, who had been killed by one of the 7 swordsmen from the mist for his sword, which was made for him in his honor guard. I am aware of my enduring storm. Ryu kissed Sasami on the lips and said, we will not give up until we are certain that our granddaughter and our daughter Mito-chan are safe in Konoha. More than 15,000 troops are being sent. As she sat on her floating pillow with her computer in front of her, Washu said, they think their numbers will surpass our small numbers of only 1,500. That's all right, we'll make sure none of them come back. Because this will be Uzu's final stand and the moment when Konoha and Suna's war changes, Ryu said, his violet eyes blazing. Since this was their last stand and Uzu would fire but not without a fight, all of his soldiers stood ready as they bid their loved ones farewell, knowing that this would be their last time together. The Konoha. Since her mother was away on a mission, Kushina was sent to her aunt at her request, and her father was eager to get her out of the village. She had left days before anyone knew about the impending attack on her former home. A flashback. Looking at his daughter, who was 8 years old, Seto said, Kushina, you are being sent to Konoha. What do you mean I am being sent to Konoha, father? Kushina asked. setting down her sword and turning to face her father. She was a little uncomfortable with this thought, so she asked him. As he saw his daughter's pale face, Seto sighed and gave her a gentle smile. My sister Mito is grown very ill and has requested that I send you to take over as the new Jinchuriki of the Kyubi no Kitsune. Did you send mother out of the village for this reason? So she wouldn't be present to discover that you're doing this? Her violet eyes are filled with anger as she asks him this question. No, sweetheart, I needed your mother, who is our best spy, to go and learn about the impending attack on the village. Seto's eyes softened as he said, I need to know how many troops they plan to send out way. I would never in a million years send you away. But I'm at a loss, Kushina-chan. As the youngest member of the main family, you are also the strongest and most capable of bearing this burden. Her grandchildren would crumble and shatter at the mere thought of becoming a Jinchuriki because none of Mito's children are strong enough. With both your mother's and your grandmother's blood coursing through your veins. I think you're the most qualified person for this task. My beloved daughter will live a long and happy life in Konoha. Do you want to become a shinobi? It's entirely up to you. You cannot be forced by anyone. He stood in front of her and said, because if anything, you can always return home to Uzu. As Kushina left his office to pack, prepare for the trip, and confront her aunt's curse, she nodded her head. However, one question persisted in her mind. What had caused her aunt to become ill? Flashback's conclusion. Kushina stood in front of Mito and gazed up at her aunt, whom she had only seen 2 years prior. Her grandmother had ensured that the woman was well. Kushina said, Auntie Mito. Looking at Kushina, Mito grinned and said, My dear niece. I apologize for calling on you at this particular moment. She said to Kushina, I know your mother must be upset with me. She may be a little sad to be separated from her family, Kushina said. My father sent me off before my mother returned from her mission and while both of my grandmothers were busy. Kushina-chan, I sincerely apologize. Forgive me, please. I know I could have summoned Washu-sama, but I am sick and the Kyubi cannot heal me. However, she is more needed in the village than to come heal me, Mito remarked. Kushina frowned and said, Grandmother would have come if she knew you needed her. I am aware. Cough, but she is necessary to heal those in Uzu who have been wounded in the war. Mito wiped the blood from her mouth and said, What I have would have killed me anyway. In response, Kushina arched an eyebrow. What's wrong with you? I don't like this, she asked. I was poisoned with something that prevents both my own natural healing factors and the Biju's chakra from healing me. We must therefore discreetly seal the Biju inside of you. Never reveal to anyone that you are in possession of the beast. Since Mito knew her time was drawing near, she said, because there will be people from outside the village who will stop at nothing to take it from you, as well as people from within the shadows of this very village who will try to kill you for it. Kushina imitated Mito and resealed the Kyubi inside herself while nodding her head. That night, Mito passed away from chakra poisoning while he slept. Uzu. Ryoko was upset with her late husband for what he had done, but it was for the best. If she had been in the tower when he was killed, she might have been killed or worse, abducted and sold to the highest bidder as something she wouldn't want for her child or anyone else. Ryoko was thinking of her daughter as she stood on the shore before the battle. Washu approached Ryoko from behind and said, Are you thinking about Kushina again? She questioned her daughter. Ryoko turned to face her mother. Yes, they had become closer and healed their bond during their time in the elemental nations. I was never able to bid her farewell. Ryoko said, I just told her I would see her when I return. I am aware, I was not even able to bid her farewell. Washu said, I was just informed that Ryo-Oki took her to Konoha. Little Cabot leapt on Ryoko's shoulder and caressed her cheek. We know she arrived safely, at least. I found the letter. Ryoko turned to face Washu and said, as we all know, Mito was dying and there was nothing anyone could do to save her. She possesses the strongest of all the tail bijus. As she considered it, Washu nodded and said, yes, and that had me wondering if someone did something to stop the beast from healing her and stopping her bloodline from healing her as well. Ryoko wanted to simply fly over there and take her baby away from them, but she knew that she would be safer there than in the village with them at the moment. You know there are several in that village I do not trust and one of them is the former student of her foolish husband. I am aware, however, we trained her to be the greatest. She is holding your gems because you no longer require them, along with the Biju's chakra. She'll gain even more strength. Mito made the right decision in selecting her. Because no one else was capable of handling such power. Washu grinned at her daughter and said, maybe she will be the one to have the child of light or be the child of light. That girl raised a lot of hell. I think the child of light will be born to her. As you and Sasami mentioned. Ryoko smiled and said, she looks like me, and I felt sorry for the poor fool who falls in love with her. Speaking, Sasami Tsunami approached the mother-daughter and said, I agree with you both. Kushina represents our future, our hope, and our light. We sent those ships out tonight, but they didn't arrive. She informed her sister, we know Uzu still resides within your daughter Ryoko. You're correct. To our future, Ryoko said. He was fortunate enough to have married and loved one of them, but his son had married one of the others he fell in love with. Ryu watched his wife and family talk, and he always wondered how they never really aged. He knew they used something like a genjutsu to make it look like they aged, but in reality, they looked more like three goddesses walking this planet. He was aware that Sasami was now Tsunami, a goddess along with Washu, and that they were one of the three goddesses of their world because their sister Tokimi sent her here to meet the man she was destined for. His lovely wife had once told him that they were from a planet called Jirai, where her parents were the rulers, that she had a sister on a planet called Earth who married their half-brother's grandson, and how her sister was so cruel and heartbreaking to her on the eve of her wed. He was initially shocked, but after considering it and his father, he stopped caring because he felt honored that a goddess would ever love him. Jirai planet. Tenchi and Ayaka go to see her parents, and Ayaka smiles up at them and says, Mother, Father, Auntie Funaho. Daughter. Her father said, Tenchi. As she hurried down to give them hugs, her mother exclaimed, Oh my Ayaka and dear Tenchi. I miss Sasami-chan, said Ayaka, turning away from her half-mother as Funaho scowled at her. For what you did that day so long ago, why haven't you gone and apologized to your sister? She asks her niece. Why do I have to apologize? Ayaka scowled at her. She complained as though she had never done anything wrong, saying, I wanted to be perfect on my wedding day, and they didn't do anything right. To make matters worse, they fled, leaving me without a bridesmaid or maid of honor. Ayaka is your sister, and I still feel bad for not stopping them, Tenchi said as he stood beside her, sighing. He told his wife, but Grandpa said I had to let them go. As she struggled to come up with an idea, Ayaka whimpered, but Tenchi dear. Ayaka, that's enough. She knew she couldn't get away with this because Sasami was the one who got them to stay on Earth the last time. You will go and find your sister, her father said, his eyes hardening at her. All right, I am going to search for my sister. However, that would mean that you, your mother, and Auntie Funaho would have to watch the kids for us. Ayaka smiled, knowing that her mother had been wanting to spend time with the grandchildren and unload them on anyone who would take them. As the other two went pale, Ayaka's mother said, Oh honey, we would love to. Come on hun, we need to find my sister and get a break from out kids, Ayaka told Tenchi as they both ran to their spaceship. Alright, love you, Ayaka said as her children appeared in the throne room, grabbing Tenchi and making a mad dash for it. Kuni no Uzu. It would have been worse if it hadn't been for them. Ryu stood on his last leg as he led his wife, Washu, and Ryoko to a tomb that Washu had made and told him about to take them to if they ever got hurt or passed out from overusing their powers. All 15,000 troops died fighting the small army of 1,500. I know girl, Ryo-Oki sobbed as he sat on his shoulder. They'll be alright. They must rest for a while, he said. Ryo-Oki continued to sob as she said, Meow. I have these scrolls, Ryo-Oki. Take them to Kushina, please. It's all our village has left. This world is not for me. The only reason I am still walking and able to rescue them is because of the three goddesses. As he lay his beloved down in a pool beside Washu and Ryoko, Ryu said, Please take these to my granddaughter and make sure she lives a long and happy life. Ryo-Oki took the scroll in her mouth, ran out of the tomb, leapt into the air, and changed into her spaceship, saying, Meow. As he lay down beside his wife in the final pool, Ryu said, May the goddesses gild you. His world was black. Kushina had been in the village hidden in the leaf for 10 years, during which time she had made friends and fallen in love. She and the others had also fought in the 3SWW when they were only 16 years old, and both she and Minato Namikaze were considered war heroes because of the way Kushina's strange little summons would change into a ship to transport the wounded and injured off the battlefield and had made many missions go more smoothly. However, she was waiting for her friends to arrive at her house on the eve of her 19th birthday. Ryo-Oki grinned up at Kushina and said, Meow. My little sister is someone I know. I also miss my mother and grandmother. It's strange to survive without them, Kushina remarked with a melancholy grin. Ryo-Oki gave Kushina a hug and said, meow. Kushina took her younger sister by the hand and led her into her own bedroom, saying, I think it is time for you to get to bed, little one. Ryo-Oki leapt into her bed with her carrot pillows and blankets and exclaimed, meow, meow. Good night, Ryo-Oki. As she closed Ryo-Oki's bedroom door, Kushina uttered the words, may the three goddesses protect you in your sleep. As she entered her living room, she noticed Minato standing there and approached him, saying, hey Minato-kun. Hey Kushina-chan. Minato smiled softly as he pulled her into an embrace and gave her a gentle kiss. Still in shock that Minato loved her and wanted to date her, Kushina blushed softly. As he took out a small gift box and gave it to Kushina, Minato grinned and said, I have something for you. Kushina looked at the box, a little perplexed. What is it? Kushina asked, looking up at Minato with excitement in her eyes. I'm not sure. While Kushina was busy opening the small gift box, which contained a ruby and sapphire ring, Minato got down on one knee and said, why don't you open it and we'll find out together? Would you marry me, Kushina-chan? She glanced down at him from the ring in the box as he asked. As she collapsed to her knees, tears filled her eyes. Yes, I'll marry you, she sobbed as she gave him a hug. As Kushina slammed into him with full force, Minato released a breath he didn't realize he was holding. Knowing that she was worried about her younger sister, he told her, I love you Kushina-chan and I want to spend my life you and Ryo-Oki. I'm happy to hear that, she said, grinning as tears streamed down her swollen cheeks and she looked up at him. Minato-kun, you are also loved by me. She told him, I'm glad you love Ryo-Oki and me. The gems Ryoko had given Kushina glowed softly as Kushina could hear Ryo-Oki talking, and off in the doorway stood Ryo-Oki in her little girl form, crying as she saw her sister's happiness and the fact that she was getting a big brother. Looking up at the doorway, Kushina grinned and opened her arms to let Ryo-Oki join her and Minato. They are now a family, and she wanted Ryo-Oki to know that they will always be together, no matter what. The evening of October 10th, 2 years later. Since Kushina was the holder of a Biju, she needed a seal master to keep her seal stable during labor, and Jiraiya was acting foolishly and leaving, so Minato was left to take care of his wife's seal. In any case, it was better this way because Minato didn't want Jiraiya to see his wife's belly, and he was still upset about the man spying on them on the night of their wedding and the night Kushina became pregnant with their son. Ryo-Oki had hurried Kushina to the safe house and had the Anbu inform Minato of what was happening. Minato arrived just as Kushina started to push, causing the seal to momentarily become unstable. He used his chakra to stabilize it while Kushina held onto his other hand. Ryo-Oki stood aside, experiencing the same emotions she had when Ryoko had Kushina, but this time it was more dangerous because her sister had a monster sealed inside of her, and nothing positive would happen if it escaped. My dear, you're doing great. Ignore the seal and just keep moving forward. It's okay, Minato said, grinning at his sweetheart. I'm going to kick your ass after I give birth to our son, you bastard. Kushina sobbed because she was in more agony than she had ever experienced. He was going to let her suffer for once, and the nine-tailed fox was having a heyday inside of her, just laughing his fuzzy ass off at her pain. After an hour or so, the sound of a baby's cries filled the safe house as the midwife held a baby boy with silver blonde hair and the bluest eyes anyone had ever seen. Kushina grinned because she saw a piece of her mother in him. Eventually, her mother's cyan hair turned silver, and she was beautiful. Now, she had a piece of her mother in her son. Kushina slowly sat up to embrace her son and remarked, he is beautiful. Minato had ensured the stability of her seal, which was weak but stable enough to prevent the fox from escaping. Minato smiled at his wife and said, that he is, and it appears he has your mother's hair color as well as my own. With a gentle smile, she replied, yeah. As she stood beside Kushina's bedside, Ryo-Oki said, meow. Minato smiled and lifted her up so she could see the baby, and Ryo-Oki grinned, telling Kushina in their shared mental link, just as tiny as you were. With a smile, Kushina tells her younger sister, I forget at times you were there the day I was born. Minato smiles at his family. When he once asked Ryo-Oki how old she was, all he received was that she was elderly and would not disclose her age. As a masked man stood in front of them all, an Anbu suddenly flew into the room. Hello there, he said. As a gloomy aura enveloped the man, he said, congratulations on your son. The land of whirlpools, ruins. Tokimi stood on the beach, staring at what was left of the village, which was completely destroyed, but she could sense that they were still alive, deep inside a tomb that Washu had built. When she reached the center of the village, where the Uzukage Tower once stood tall and proud, she walked slowly down the old stone streets because she could feel the energy coming from this place. She waved her hand to blast the doors off their hinges, then she walked over to a wall, and then another wave removed it, leaving behind a stairway that led to an underground crawl. A smirk crossed her lips as she watched them slowly awaken. As she descended the ancient stone steps, she heard machines beeping and going off from something that Washu had set up. She entered the room and saw 4 beds with 3 women and 1 man, who was probably either Sasami's or Washu's husband. Whoever it was, he was going to get a rude awakening with the others. She looked at the computer screen by where they slept and pushed a few buttons and saw a gas being released into where they slept. Tokimi looked at them and said, "It is about time you 4 have risen." Ryoko simply gave her a scowl and said, "Why are you here?" She asked, not particularly pleased to see her. Ryoko felt uneasy as Tokimi grinned at her and said, "Your daughter is dying and is in dire need of your aid. Because she and her spouse are abandoning their son. If you don't take action, dire will be his fate," she informed them. Ryoko was now awake and prepared for combat, which was the outcome she had hoped for. "Where are they? What is the duration of our sleep?" She was willing to do anything for her child, so she made the demand. After lying his wife down in her bed, Ryu was shocked that he had survived, but he finally got out of bed. With the help of the 3 goddesses, he was healed during his stay and slept next to them. Glancing at Tokimi, Sasami said, "Then we must go to Konoha to save the child." "I'll send you 3 there," said Tokimi with a smile. "Unfortunately, though, it will be too late to save Minato-kun and Kushina-chan." They nodded in agreement as she said, "But you will be able to protect Naruto-kun from the bastard that hides in the shadows." Moving swiftly through her lab, Washu grabs a number of scrolls that her husband hadn't sent their granddaughter. She will need these scrolls to set up their new home in Konoha, and she says, "I'm ready." She sealed them away in a tattoo on her arm and stood next to her husband in her chibi, which occasionally alarmed him. Tokimi said, "Tsunami, would you please be so kind to help me?" Washu, sensing what was about to happen, approached her sister and took her goddess as well. Ryu and Ryoko stood in the center of the 3 goddesses, linked hands, and teleported to a crying baby with a flash of light. Beyond Konoha, as Minato and Kushina were blinded by a flash of light and the Shinigami glared at the 4 souls that should have been his long ago, Kushina said in her dying breath, "Be a good boy, Naruto." Kushina looked up at her mother, tears and blood streaming down her cheeks as she sobbed, "Mama." When Ryoko heard her daughter's voices, she turned around and saw a large claw in the middle of her daughter. "Who, Kushina-chan?" Ryoko cried out as the Shinigami used this time to complete sealing the Kyuubi, but Tokimi prevented them from stealing half the Biju's soul. "You'll completely seal it inside the boy." Tokimi growled and gave Death a fierce look. The Shinigami nodded and followed the goddess's instructions. As the light went out of her eyes, Kushina said, "Mama P, please protect our son." She was too weak from giving birth, having the Biju torn out of her, and then fighting the masked man, and the last nail in her coffin was Kurama's claw through her stomach. She had lost too much blood, and there was nothing anyone could do to save her. Minato and Kushina both fell to the ground with only a little life left in them. With the light gone from his eyes as well, a feeble Minato said, protect him from the masked Uchiha." Since meeting Madara Uchiha at Mito's wedding to her husband, Washu had never been fond of the Uchiha family. "Shish, Naruto," Ryoko said, bending down to pick up the sobbing infant. "Everything will be fine," she assured him. The gems that had once belonged to Ryoko were seen floating from Kushina's body to Naruto, where they were placed on both of his wrists and glowing subtly. She had intended to take the baby and flee when Ryo-Oki came limping out of some bushes in her human form. Minato had instructed her to keep Naruto away from Danzo and the elders because they would only use and harm the boy, and she was not going to allow her nephew to be harmed or used by some old fools. "Ryoko," Ryo-Oki cried through their mental connection. In tears, Ryoko said, "Ryo-Oki, my dear little sister." She grinned as she gazed at her younger sister. While Tsunami turned back into Sasami and Washu prepared to fight, Ryoko shoved Ryo-Oki behind her, and Tokimi glanced over to the tree line. Ryu drew his sword. At that moment, the 3rd Hokage, accompanied by a white-haired man and a team of Anbu, landed in front of the group. The 3rd Hokage saw his friend standing in front of him and said, "Ryua." Ryu glanced at the elderly man in front of him and blinked a few times. Sarutobi. His voice was filled with astonishment and surprise as he asked. What does this signify? When Uzu was attacked, you perished. Sarutobi said this as he prepared to battle the man in front of him. Ryu laughed as he stood beside his wife and said, I didn't die. My wife had a few small tricks that saved all our lives and had us in a coma-like sleep for the past few years, so no one ever found my body, he said to his old friend. His aged gaze shifted to Washu, who appeared to be a young girl, then to the Sasami, and finally to Ryoko, who was clutching a baby, with Ryo Oki peeking out from behind her. Oki Ryo, is Ryoko really there? Sarutobi should be questioned because he was aware that the young child possessed a unique connection that no one could duplicate. He nodded her head, startled to see 4 people raised from the dead and an odd woman standing beside them. Before you inquire, the goddess Tokimi is who I am. All I came to do was wake up my sister, niece, and, to my astonishment, brother-in-law. Tokimi smiled at everyone in front of them and said, because that child in my niece's arms will need them in the near future. They were in the presence of a goddess who claimed Lady Sasami and Lady Washu as her sisters, and they were unsure of what to do. The question that ran through everyone's minds was whether this made them goddesses as well. Those questions will only cause trouble, Washu said, raising a hand. Since they heard tales of her during the wars, they didn't want to offend her, so they simply nodded their heads in agreement. For the time being, we will leave things as they are, she said. She was known as the mad scientist because no one could ever stop her from creating poisons, not even Lady Tsunade, and no one knew what kinds of poisons she used. As Kushina's mother, we are his family. It is my responsibility and that of my family to raise my grandson, Ryoko said, refusing to accept no. Whatever became of the Kyuubi? Asked the man with the white hair. Old fool, you have nothing to worry about, Tokimi said, glaring at him and making a red orb appear in her hand. With all eyes on him now, she growled, you should be more concerned about your godson and less concerned about reporting to the dogs you serve. Jiraiya, asked Sarutobi. The now-named Jiraiya turned his head away, unable to respond to his former sensei because he had sold his soul to the devil and disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Those idiots you call your friends, also referred to as the village elders, are the ones who employ your former pupil. If he discovered that Naruto had the Kyuubi sealed inside of him, he was to bring him to them. Tokimi could see the shock on the man's face as she said, because the one you call Danzo wants a loyal weapon to call upon when the mood strikes him, and having control of the Nine Tails would be the ultimate weapon in his foolish old eyes. His student had betrayed him, but when? When had he started working for Danzo of all people? That was the question he would need to find out the answers to. In addition to the village's weakness, Danzo will attempt to seize power and ascend to the position of Hokage. Old man, you're never going to take the hat again. Because you do not want shinobi to roam this village with emotionless, mindless zombies. Because they won't be loyal to their home or their land. But with you taking back the hat, he will use the civilian council to take power away from you and the other 2 that are the elders on your council, Tokimi said, glaring at him and interrupting him as she spoke again. It will all fall to him. As Hokage, you have a brief window of opportunity to ensure that you retain all of your power. Replace the elders during that period since they are merely props in Danzo's scheme, if you're not up to the task. Then, over the next 3 to 4 years, find someone to succeed you as Hokage. However, she told him, it must be someone strong who will not fall and become a puppet to Danzo and those stupid civilians that he uses as his puppets. While the goddess spoke, everyone was silent. Sasami gave Sarutobi a gentle smile and said, we will live in the old Uzumaki compound that Mito had made for us. His only thought was that the Uzumaki bloodline was incredible and that his sensei's mother-in-law was still so young and gorgeous and standing in front of him. Sarutobi nodded his head in response to Tokimi and Sasami's commands, saying, very well. By morning, he was going to have a terrible headache. 15 years had passed since Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze was born, the son of Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze and Minato Namikaze. Being the last of her family, she had never abandoned her family name. Her clan's last, up until the day her son was born and her mother and grandparents arrived, that is. Ryoko rejoined the shinobi after Naruto turned 5 because she was bored with being a mother to her grandson and had grown tired of sitting at home. Don't misunderstand her, she wouldn't trade it for anything because she loved every moment of it. It was time for her to return to the battlefield, though, because she was missing the action. With Ryo Oki, her mother, and Tsunami at his side, Naruto was doing well. Ryu had taken charge of the boys' training, and Washu had started using his gems to train him while Ryoko continued to make mistakes and summon Kurama from his seal. There was nothing good about that. Washu and Tsunami were present when the village was founded, and Ryu, the first Hokage's in-laws, were now the village's new elders. Since he was unable to control the two women and they had defeated him at every trick he knew and attempted to pull against them, Danzo was not pleased to lose his two most potent puppets on the council. He didn't go far enough. In order to exact revenge on his grandparents for what they had done to him since his return, Danzo had sent his young Root to abduct Naruto one night. Since it had been discovered that Danzo had blackmailed Jiraiya over Dan's death, he had lost Jiraiya as one of his small pawns. Because Jiraiya was aware of the ambush and was about to inform Tsunade, Danzo poisoned him, accused him of being intoxicated, and claimed he was seeing common whores. Even pictures of Jiraiya with a whore on the night the mission failed were in Danzo's possession. However, Washu and Ryoko were unable to trust Jiraiya around Naruto even after it became apparent that he had been used. They didn't want Danzo's old tool close to the boy, because the man might still have a seal on him that they haven't discovered yet. They couldn't risk it because I set off a time bomb that would be too dangerous for the boy. The old fool didn't want to meet and get to know the boy because they had already lost too much. Perhaps they would consider it when the boy grew up. But perhaps. However, we are veering off course. Since that fateful day 15 years ago, Naruto has grown up content and loved. Washu made sure that no one knew his little secret because Ryoko would kill anyone who found out. A few people who discovered the truth were even killed by Ryu. However, they had been spies for Root. It was the day of the Academy's graduation exam, and the civilian council was upset because the test was still difficult and they were making their kids concentrate on learning the shinobi arts rather than chasing after all the clan heirs or heiresses. Many members of the civilian council had sent their kids to the academy in an attempt to find a husband or wife within the clans, and it would be even better if they could attract the attention of an heir. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze and Sasuke Uchiha, the only male heir of the Uchiha clan after his brother killed their father and other clansmen while leaving his mother, women, and children alive, were the two boys at the academy with the biggest fan clubs. Itachi had turned into a nuke nin and fled the village after killing his father. Strangely enough, though, Sasuke's mother revealed to him the real reason his brother killed their useless father and how they intended to tarnish the Uchiha name in order to gain power they didn't require. When his father didn't get his way in a council meeting regarding prohibiting any of the other clans from joining the military police force, he was going to have a major tantrum. His mother was going to live by that story until the end of her days. Because of something else, Sasuke had portrayed her husband as a hero, but he was actually a jerk. Painting the deceased bastard as a big-ass whiner who would start a civil war over something so trivial and childish is the perfect way to exact revenge. However, Naruto never let anything get to him. Ryoko, his grandmother, used to beat him up. He was an ordinary boy. He was well liked for simply being a good kid who was always ready to lend a helping hand to anyone in need, and he had a number of friends among the clan kids. As the new heir to his family clan, Sasuke had his ego and felt he was too good for anyone. He didn't have many friends, but strangely, he occasionally spent time with Naruto. If Ryoko had the chance, she would have smothered Sasuke's smile, but regrettably, she was unable to do so because the civilian council loved the boy as if his shit were gold. A man with black hair pulled back in a spiky ponytail and a scar across his nose said, "All right students, we have a survival course you all must run to pass as long as doing several jutsu and the written exam." Iruka was the one in question. Naruto's tutor at home. Since there were multiple genin and occasionally chunin or jonin hidden there that they had to battle or outwit, all of the students complained that they didn't want to participate in the survival course. There were rumors that Washu and Ryoko participated in 1 year, but nobody passed. They claimed that none of them were suitable to become shinobi, so they had all been held back for an additional year. Since then, when it came time for the final exam to become genin, all of the genin hopefuls prayed that those two women would not participate and would be far, far away from the village. However, Kami was making fun of them this year. Because Ryoko had intended to expel all civilians and fangirls from that survival course, she was laughing uncontrollably. She would demonstrate why she didn't think they were suitable to be shinobi. As she observed from a tiny gap in the darkness, Ryoko grinned evilly and said, "Come my pretties. All of the children felt a chill go up their spines because they knew that something bad was going to happen and that no one could save them from whatever fate awaited them once they stepped inside those walls. Mizuki observed every child while standing off to the sidelines. My master instructed me to bring him the brats from Uchiha and Uzumaki. He thought to himself, but Naruto will be hard to get because his family is always around him, and that strange little brown-haired girl is up in that tree right now watching us. His eyes slightly moved, and he looked up at Ryo-Oki, who was grinning and watching after Naruto. Ryo-Oki's face is mingled with a frown as she turns to face Mizuki. She sensed that dark and weird aura leaving him once more. She disliked the sensation, which made her feel ill, and she didn't give a damn about how she appeared to her younger brother or nephew. Ryoko, she uttered. Yes, Ryo-Oki, what's the issue? Ryoko asked, sensing from the tone of Ryo-Oki's voice that something was bothering her. I sense that gloomy aura again, and Mizuki is staring at Naru-chan in an odd way. Ryoko could hear the concern in her voice as Ryo-Oki said, there's something wrong with him, and he always glares at me when he sees me around Naru-chan. For now, don't worry. As she attempted to reassure Ryo-Oki, who was now wondering what the silver-haired man was planning against her grandson, she said, I will look into it after I am done here today. The boy's silver blonde hair will be harmed if he even touches it. Mizuki's life would be over. After 3 hours, only 30% of the civilian students in the class had successfully completed the survival course, with nearly 70% of them failing. Some are just lucky, and some are shire will. In part, Ryoko was just giving them a break because she could see how hard they worked and how much they wanted this, while the others were only trying to impress one of the clan heirs. Since they understood what it took to get past her, Ryoko was proud of all the shinobi-born children who passed without anyone being abandoned or thrown out. By creating multiple shadow clones to trip her and set up a trap for her, Naruto was able to get past her the fastest. As the individuals who failed left the training area, Iruka remarked, good, you all did well. Those of you who didn't make it, I'll see you in 2 weeks and be ready to study and work your tails off. Some are simply giving up and moving on to civilian schools, while others are heading home or visiting the library to obtain some scrolls for training. As the children gathered in line, Iruka said, okay, line up. Next, we will do the jutsu portion of the exam. Everyone was in line. Naruto watched in boredom as his grandmother completed her assigned task, smiling like a man-woman. She waved back at him after he waved. Iruka said, all right Naruto. You need to do the clone, hedge, and replacement jutsu, and if you knew any others would be extra credit. Ino was the only person left after he had gone through everyone else. Naruto smirked at Iruka, nodded his head, made the cross sign, and muttered something. He said, Shadow Clone Jutsu. Iruka was horrified to see an academy student performing a Jonin jutsu, and not all Jonins are even capable of doing it. Standing beside him were 6 copies of Naruto, each of whom assumed the form of the Kyuubi while the other 6 took on the hedge of his parents, grandparents, and Hokage, frightening the 2 Chunin teachers to death. After that, he was replaced by Ryoko, who was floating in midair and staring at everyone with wide eyes. Ryoko turned to face her now normal-looking grandson and said, damn it Naruto. Naruto gave her a sly smile. He walked back to them and rubbed his hand behind his head, saying, sorry grandma. Iruka demanded, who taught you the shadow clone? As he stood beside Ryoko and began to float directly beside her, Naruto turned to face him. As Ryoko turned to face Iruka, he pointed to her and said, She did. What? He has chakra reserves as high if not higher than a Jonin, and that is due to his family bloodlines from Uzumaki and mine and a little from his father. Ryoko replied with a grin. Sasuke gave Naruto a glare because he didn't like that the boy was stronger than him. Not even a tiny bit. Iruka watched the 2 floating in front of him and gave a stupid nod. He just wanted this to be over with, so he asked, do you know any other jutsus? As everyone's eyes widened, Naruto nodded his head and extended his left hand to form his father's jutsu. Even though he was young, he was already familiar with the 4th jutsu. Iruka, unsure of what to think, said, all right you pass. Ino you're up. Mizuki narrowed his eyes and watched the boy with the blonde, silver hair, sensing that this would be a little difficult to get him for his master. As Iruka glanced at everyone, they had gone back into the classroom. As they all held their forehead protectors, he declared, I am proud of everyone, and those of you still here have passed and are now genin of our village. Naruto smiled as she put one with a silver cloth around her forehead. He said to his younger sister Aunt, I made it, Ryo-oki-chan. Naru-chan, you have my admiration. You've done well, Ryo-oki remarked. Outside of space, just beyond the Earth, where the elemental nations were located, a Jirai ship materialized. A computer voice said, Wake the prince and princess. 2 logs appeared in front of 2 sleep chambers. Only Ayaka and Tenchi were housed in the 2 sleeping chambers. Since it took 30 years to locate Sasami and the others who had disappeared prior to their wedding with Lady Tokimi's assistance, they had been sleeping for more than 25 years. As the glass over her sleeping chamber opened, Ayaka opened her eyes slowly and turned to watch Tenchi push out of his own. Tenchi, she asked. Tenchi turned to face Ayaka as the 2 logs appeared in front of them and said, I think they might have found her. The log with the red writing on it read, Princess Ayaka, Prince Tenchi. We have found Princess Sasami and the other 2. Ayaka didn't want to play around, so she said, Good. Take us to them. The ship computer said, There isn't a beacon on this planet for us to land safely. Ayaka snarled, Then figure it out. The ships knew how to land without one. The Uzumaki compound. Washu gave her computer a fierce look. When a spaceship entered the planet's orbit, her sensors began to go off. She shouted to the others, Okay, everyone, get ready, I think Ayaka has finally found us. The dark pinkett caught everyone's attention as they entered the living room. Naruto approached her. He sat down next to her and looked at the computer screen in front of her, asking, What do you mean, Grandma? As Ryu stood in the doorway leading to the kitchen and Tsunami descended the stairs, Ryoko said, It's just the damn spoiled-ass princess that is the sister of your grandma Tsunami. Ryoko had just come through the wall from the kitchen. Tsunami's expression was slightly frowning. Naruto, who was now floating upside down, looked up at her and said, I really don't want to see Ayaka. I have my own life and I am no longer Sasami. Because he was aware of the tale of his grandmother and how 2 souls became one. Washu frowned even more and said, Even if you don't want to see her. It appears your parents have ordered her to find you. When she heard a crash outside their house, she added, Also they will be here any second now. Ryu yelled, Damn it, after putting in a lot of effort over the previous few yards to build that lake. To see the wrecked spaceship inside their lake, everyone rushed outside the house. Ryu was frowning because all of his effort had been in vain. He simply scowled at the 2 individuals leaving the lake he had been working on for a long time. You could hear the poison leaking from Ryoko's words as she asked, What the hell are you doing here, princess? Naruto was unimpressed by his great aunt, who resembled a wet rat with purple hair, so he just floated there and watched the 2 newcomers. Ayaka glanced up at the person talking to her from her damp dress. She squinted at the demon woman she had battled so valiantly to win Tenchi's affection. She turned to Tenchi and pouted at him, growling, Father has sent me to find you 3. Ryoko turned and walked back into the house, saying, Well, you found us. You can go home now. She didn't want to waste any more time with the 2 of them. Tenchi had broken her heart, and she had no affection for the purple-haired woman who appeared to be a drowning rat in front of her. Tenchi gazed at their spaceship and sighed. It was destroyed and possibly completely lost. He had to go back and check it, so he wasn't sure yet. He frowned slightly and said, That might be harder than what you think, Ryoko. This was not the greeting he had anticipated from her. Ryoko squinted at them. She wasted no more time on the 2, so she disappeared into the house and said, Well, there is a hotel in the village you 2 can stay at. Naruto felt the pain and sorrow emanating from his grandmother as he watched her disappear. His eyes narrowed as he turned back to face the 2 newcomers. As Ryu stood beside his wife, he floated over to Tsunami and asked, Grandma Tsunami, is this really the woman that was so cold-hearted to you 3 so long ago? Tsunami had a faint smile on her lips as she gave Naruto a gentle glance. She turned to face Ayaka, who was staring at her younger sister, who was now the goddess Tsunami instead of Sasami, with wide eyes. It was ages ago, my dear boy. But yes, this is my sister Ayaka. Tsunami, when did that happen? Ayaka asked, still in disbelief over this small revelation. Tsunami squinted at her sister from a previous life. She asks the woman in front of her, It happened a long time ago, Ayaka. You shouldn't worry yourself about the past. But why are you here? Ayaka turned away from her sister in embarrassment and said, Father has sent me to find you and bring you home and for me to tell you sorry. I am sorry for being a cold and heartless bitch to you 3 on the eve of my wedding. Tsunami exhaled deeply. That is in the past. I will tell you this now. I will not be returning to Jirai with you. For my life is here with my family. I have moved on with my life and that is something you should be doing as well. She stated to her sister. Grabbing his wife's hand, Ryu drew her into his embrace and held her. Because he didn't like seeing her sister in their house. I will not allow you to take my wife from me. I will fight you till the bitter end for her. He yelled. Tenchi and Ayaka were now staring at the man with the red hair with wide eyes. This time, Tenchi asks, "What do you mean your wife?" He was shocked to discover that his wife's sister's husband was the man with the red hair who had been standing next to her. Ryu narrowed his eyes at Tenchi as he prepared to draw his swords from the seals on his hands. The three goddesses blessed me with this beautiful and loving woman. I would fight the devil himself if anyone ever tried to take her from me. Washu grinned. She looked at him and laughed, saying, "You have fought the arms of hell for her." Ryu nodded his head in agreement, grinning. Washu scowled at all the work she had ahead of her as she walked past them. "But it appears I will have to fix your ship. I will have it done in a week's time. So you can return back to your father and tell him we wish not to return." Ayaka pivoted and glanced at Washu. She complained, "But I can't. Father ordered me." Washu turned and gave her a narrow-eyed stare. "I don't give a damn what your father orders. For I do not take orders from that man," she stated to Ayaka. The dark Pinkett stepped away from Ayaka. Because of how aloof she was toward her, she frightened her. Ayaka and Tenchi were staring at the boy with the silver blonde hair when Naruto floated past them. As chakra chains emerged from his hands and back and wrapped around the spaceship, he said, "Hey Grandma Washu. Do you need any help?" As he lifted it out of the now wrecked lake his grandfather had spent time creating for his training. Moving the ship to dry land, he inhaled deeply as he set it down and felt the chains melt back into him. Tenchi's eyes were wide as he observed the actions of the young man in front of him. He muttered, "Wow, that is amazing." Naruto turned to face him as if it were nothing, and he frequently did things like this. Now that he was floating once more, Naruto said, "It was nothing. I just used my chakra chains to move it." The two were unable to miss it. He seemed to have some traits in common with Ryoko. Ayaka looked at the boy and asked, "Whose mother?" Before responding, he gave her a somewhat perplexed look. "My mother was Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze." Ayaka glanced at him in confusion before turning to face her younger sister in search of clarification. Tsunami looked at her sister and sighed in an attempt. Ryu merely complained as Tsunami turned to enter the house and said, "Come inside and dry off and I will tell you what has gone on. Since we left you two." The thought of them living in his house bothered him. But since it was his wife's family, he wouldn't oppose her. They followed them back inside the house because Washu didn't feel like working on the spaceship at the moment and planned to start working on it in the morning. Because she would prefer to attend the upcoming council meeting without being irritated. More than she was now, that is. Washu showed them the two bathrooms and gave them clean clothes. She said, "Get cleaned up and come to the living room just down this hallways." They nodded, disappeared into the two bathrooms, and emerged 20 minutes later, with Washu drinking tea on the coffee table in the living room and Naruto nowhere to be seen. Ryoko merely stared at the teacup in front of her while she sat on the couch. Ryu held Tsunami's hand while she appeared slightly irritated. Ryu pulled her hand to his lips and kissed it, saying, "My dear, all will be well. Please don't worry." Tenchi and Ayaka entered this area. They moved to the vacant couch and took a seat across from the four in front of them. As she pretended that she had done nothing wrong to cause them to want to leave as they did, Ayaka was asked, "Well, why did you leave?" Ryoko squinted at them both as though they had both developed a second head. As she scuffed at Ayaka's shocked expression, she remarked, "Gee, I wonder why." Tsunami, who was now glaring at her sister, sighed and turned to face Ryoko. "That is enough. I am not in the mood." Tsunami glared at her sister and said, "We left because of you acting like an entitled spoiled princess Ayaka." Ayaka squinted at her younger sister, who was now giving her a fierce look. She snarled, "It was my wedding and I wanted everything perfect." With her cold eyes fixed on her sister, Tsunami said, "You were being ungrateful, and we didn't want to deal with you. So we left and then given a chance at being happy. So we took it." Ayaka appeared astonished by this. "You truly don't want to be around me or come back home?" she inquired, sounding somewhat taken aback and offended. "That's right. This is my home and I have family here. Why do I want to return back to Jerul where you would force me to watch over your children? By the looks on your faces, you have dumped them on father and mother and auntie." Tsunami said as she observed Tenchi turn his head with shame. In actuality, they did leave their kids with her parents. Tenchi attempted to defend their behavior by saying, "We did leave our children with them. But it was better for traveling would have been hard on them." Ryoko said, "Keep telling yourself that." As she got to her feet, she turned and walked out of the living room, saying, "I'm not in the mood." She wanted to blow something up, and she wanted to blow up the two idiots sitting in front of her right now. Since his grandparents had to deal with the two unwanted guests, Naruto decided it would be best to leave and go hang out with his friends. He discovered Ino working at her family's flower shop. He smiled at her and said, "Hey Ino-chan." With a smile on her face, Ino said, "Hey Naruto-kun." She glanced down at the magazine in front of her and asked him, "So what brings you by?" He gave her a smile. "I had to get out of the house for we go some unwanted visitors over, and I didn't want to be there when my grandma Ryoko blows up the house," he stated. Ino's expression was one of shock as she looked up at him. They must have really pissed off the Silver Devil, for no one wants to be on her bad side. Even IWA sends her gifts each month so she doesn't go to the village and destroy them. The young Mind Walker replied. Naruto laughed, "Yeah, I know. His grandmother was a feared figure in all of the elemental nations." Naruto remarked, "Even Gigi gives her what she wants when she appears in his office, and I think everyone is happy when she is off on missions." He was looking out the window when he noticed his grandmother flying by and an elderly man with white hair fleeing from her. He simply shook his head at this since he was aware of the man's identity and that he was the target of her current outburst. He thought to himself, "You dug that grave, Jiraiya." He turned to face Ino, who was watching the Sannin flee the woman. Ino sighed and said, "Old pervert must have been at the hot spring spying again." As he was wondering if they had made it, Naruto said, "Guess so." "Oh well. Hey Ino, is everyone still meeting up tonight at Dusty Rose for dinner?" Blinking, Ino turned back to Naruto. As she glanced at the clock and saw that it was already 5:30, she said, "Huh. Oh yeah, we are going to meet up at 6. At this, her eyes widened. Ino yelled, "Hey mom, can I close up the shop?" A brown-haired woman enters the flower shop from the rear. She turns to face her daughter while grinning at Naruto. Ino's mother approached them and said, "Sure, it's dead and I know you and the others have plans for tonight." Naruto bowed to the clan mother and said, "I'll help Ino with the trash so she can get ready and I'll walk her there and back after we are done." She smiled and said, "Oh thank you Naruto. Your family has done a wonderful raising a gentleman." He smiles as he returns to sweep the store for her after gathering and discarding all of the trash. As Ino rushes back into the show wearing a purple dress and knee-high shinobi boots, Naruto finishes all of his work and says, "My grandmothers will be happy to hear that." As she took Naruto in her arms and dragged him out of the now-closed flower shop, Ino said, "See you later mama. Love you." Her mother grinned and said, "Love you too Ino-chan and have a good time you too." They strolled along the dirt road that led to the restaurant's location in the village's center. Naruto looked at the girl who was holding him and asked, "So do you know what team you're going to be on?" As she didn't want to be placed on a team with her childhood friends, she pouted and said, "Yeah, I think I'm going to be teamed up with Shikamaru and Choji. That is what my father is hoping anyway. As he says it will be good to be with the boys for, they will take care of me." Naruto grinned down at her and said, "Yeah, I know they are like brothers to you." As she loses herself in his azure eyes, Ino blushes subtly. Ino looked away from him and said, "Yeah. Tower of Hokage." Sarutobi let out a sigh because, like Danzo, every individual he had sought to usurp had something that prevented them from ascending to the position of Hokage. As Jiraiya flew through his open window, he sighed again. As he sees his wayward student crash into the wall, Sarutobi lifts his bow. Ryoko is floating in front of him through the open window. Sarutobi asked, fearing the silver devil that loomed before him, "What happened now Ryoko-sama?" Ryoko is grinning as she turns to face him. The old man turned to face Jiraiya, who was lifting himself off the ground with blood streaming down the side of his face, and she told him, "Just found him spying at the hot spring and I did need to blow off some steam. So I took it out on him." As he was being tried, Sarutobi sighed and said, "Jiraiya, I have told you numerous times not to spy on the ladies at the hot springs." With a cheesy smile, Jiraiya said, "I apologize, sensei. I simply couldn't help myself. Because the ladies of Konoha had always been the most beautiful of all the elemental nations." Ryoko squinted at the old fool in front of her. It had been roughly 6 years since Jiraiya had visited the village, and even then, Ryoko had beaten his ass. "Well, Jiraiya, why did you return to the village?" Sarutobi asked. He was attempting to communicate with Naruto as the Shinobi Academy. Now, as though nothing had happened to him, Jiraiya stood in front of him. "I've come to inform you that a gang of A-rank nuke ninjas is banding together and is pursuing everyone associated with the Biju family." "All right," Sarutobi said, "this has nothing to do with our village because the goddess that appeared so long ago took the Kyuubi that night." He didn't care. With everyone staring at him in mild surprise, Jiraiya said, "I know sensei, but I thought you would like to know that Itachi Uchiha and Orochimaru are part of the group." This wasn't good. Sarutobi sighed and said, "That is a little unsettling." Although Ryoko was troubled by this, she maintained a composed and expressionless face. "They will come to the village to seek out Naruto. For I think that Uchiha kid figured it out," Ryoko thought. Ryoko growled, "Let them come and I'll blast them back to wherever they are hiding at." She didn't want to deal with that snake bastard after he nearly poisoned Washu the last time. Knowing that Ryoko needed to make amends with his former pupil, Sarutobi turned to face her and said, "Please Ryoko, we will handle him when the time comes." Seeing the bastard as a son he never had, Ryoko narrowed her eyes at him and hissed, "Yeah, like the last time." The old fool could have killed the bastard, but he was too weak and let the pale bastard kill his own blood. Sarutobi turned his head away from her, embarrassed that he didn't want to kill the man. Looking down at his old, weathered hands, Sarutobi muttered, "This time, it will be different." "For the hope of this village," Ryoko said as she made her way back to the open window that overlooked the village she had made her new home. As she leapt out of the window, leaving the two men to ponder, she declared, "I pray it will be. The Uzumaki estate, please come home, Sasami." As she sat in front of her younger sister, Ayaka said, "Your absence is missed by your mother, father, and aunt." "Ayaka, I told you." As she grew weary of this, Tsunami said, "I will not abandon my grandson." Ayaka grinned, hoping she would get her way, and said, "Then bring him with you." "No." Washu glared at Ayaka and said, "Naruto has started his shinobi career and he can't just pick up and leave to go on a long trip." "You mean he's a shinobi? He doesn't dress like the ninjas from back home?" Tenchi asked, still perplexed as he observed the three in front of him. "These shinobi are different from the ones from Earth," Tsunami said with a snort. "They begin early and serve their esteemed villages by carrying out missions. When he is older and able to inherit the title from the village leader, Naruto also hopes to become the Hokage of this village," she said, grinning at the thought of her grandson. "So you're saying that kids murder people?" Tenchi asked, looking shocked. "Yes. However, he is only a genin." Ryu looked at the two in front of him and said, "So it will be a while before he kills someone." They were taken aback by this and simply nodded. Washu grinned proudly and remarked, "Even Ryoko has become a legend in the shinobi world." "Has she?" Tenchi was shocked to hear this and asked, "Question." "Yes. The Silver Devil is who I am." As she emerged from the wall in front of them, Ryoko remarked, "That many of the villagers send me presents every month to keep me from declaring war on them." Ayaka turned away from Ryoko and growled, "Well, we all know you are a demon." Ryoko simply grinned and said, "Yes, pampered princess. You are nothing, and nobody here knows anything about you," she remarked, grinning. Ryoko smirks as she turns to face Washu and remarks, "Mom here is known as the mad scientist as no one can match her with poison making and has taken out whole arms on her own." Tenchi turned to face Washu and remarked, "That is shocking." They had seen how much the people they knew had changed. As they all stared at her in disbelief and terror, Tsunami said, "I have killed whole arms with my hands." They would have expected that from Ryoko and Washu, but not from sweet, naive Sasami. Ayaka started to say, "Buddha," but Tsunami interrupted. Tsunami looked down at her hands, which were covered in the blood of numerous shinobi, and said, "In this world you either fight or you die." "However, Sasami, how were you able to?" Ayaka asked, unable to comprehend this. "I've already informed you. I am Tsunami now. I am now one with Sasami, as I mentioned." Feeling sorry for everyone who lost their lives at the beginning of the second SWW, she remarked, "I am a shinobi and I fought for my clan and my homeland, which is now all gone. They have changed in this new world of theirs," Tenchi said, taking Ayaka's hands and turning to face her husband while observing him shake his head. He informed her, "They are not the same people we once knew." Ryu said, "For once you got it right." He didn't like his obnoxious sister-in-law and her stupid husband, who lets his wife take advantage of him. The three goddesses had not at all blessed their marriage. Every genin hopeful sat at the academy, waiting to find out what would happen to them. These are the people who will be their future Jonin sensei and their teammates. As Ino wondered, she asked, "So do you think your grandmother Ryoko would take on a genin team?" Naruto gave her a look. "Nah. I don't think she would. She does like teaching me. But to teach other people, I don't think she would want to do it. Also you know she loves taking all those S-rank missions that even Anbu don't want to touch. Also I think all the cages of all the other villages would have heart attacks knowing she is training the next generation and making little mini Ryokos." He told Ino and the others as they continued to pay attention. Looking at the silver blonde, Shikamaru grinned and said, "Troublesome. It is already bad enough to have one mini Ryoko running around in the village as it is." The boy merely sulks at him. Naruto pouted and crossed his arms over his chest, saying, "Hey, I'm not as bad as she is." Kiba smirks at the boy and asks, "Yeah, and the civilian council just sends you all you-can-eat coupons on them to every restaurant in the village to keep you from pranking everyone to no end." Naruto smiles. "That's just how to keep us in free dinner for as long as I can," he replied. The boy's antics simply made everyone laugh. "Just wait until we make names for ourselves in the elemental nations. I'm pretty sure I can make a bigger name for myself than my grandmother's," said Naruto with a grin. Because he was already introducing himself to the world by creating a number of poisons that even Washu struggled with, and where the poison penetrates the skin, a tiny nine-tailed fox appears on it. The foxes have been referred to as the 9 shadows of death. When a person experiences 9 distinct symptoms, the person searching for the poison's curse may treat the poisoned person incorrectly and hasten their demise. Ryoko enjoyed field testing it on a number of IWA members. Additionally, Naruto already has a bounty on his head and a team attack if he is spotted in the field, and Ryoko revealed the identity of the poison's creator to one of the IWA shinobi who had escaped. When the Hokage called Ryoko into the office to ask how IWA obtained an academy photo of Naruto and what the fuck was going on, the blonde was shocked to learn about it. Classic Ryoko simply smiled and explained that it was a part of the Christmas card she sends to IWA each year to express her gratitude for all the gifts they send her and her family each month. Anyway, the brats are back. Iruka entered the classroom and looked up at all the genin who would make a lasting impact on the shinobi world as well as those who would fade away after their first C-rank mission and simply become regular people. Iruka grinned and said, "Good morning, everyone." After passing the academy exam, all of the children paused their conversation and turned to face their Chunin sensei, whom they had known for a few years, awaiting his words of wisdom. Iruka looked at each and every one of them and said, "Today is team placement and as well with learning what teams you will be on. You will also be meeting your future Jonin senseis." I hoped they got what he was saying. That things would no longer be fun and games and that their lives would be changing. In the village, they are now regarded as adults. Iruka looks down at the papers in front of him that list all the teams and their respective fates, and a tiny smile appears on his lips after he has made eye contact with each of them. Iruka said, "All right, Team 1 will be," as Naruto and the crew simply ignored the man and resumed their conversation. When Iruka looked at Team 7, he saw that Naruto was hitting his head on his desk, Sasuke was just grinning, and Sakura was just laughing at his antics. He said, "Team 7 will be Naruto Uzumaki, Sasuke Uchiha, and finally Sakura Haruno, and your Jonin sensei will be Kakashi Hatake." He thought this was going to be fun. Her team now includes the man she has always loved, but maintained her composure because she knew the Silver Devil was watching them from somewhere in that room. Naruto cried out, "Why?" Because he wished he was on a different team. Iruka looked at Team 8 and said, "Team 8 will be Hinata Hyuga, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shino Aburame. Your Jonin sensei will be one Kurenai Yuhi." All they did was nod and smile at one another. Team 9 is still in rotation. So now let's move on to Team 10. Team 10 will be Shikamaru Nara, Choji Akamichi, and Ino Yamanaka. Your Jonin sensei will be Asuma Sarutobi, Iruka said as he noticed a tiny pout the face of Ino, but dismissed it, assuming she was upset that she wasn't a member of the Uchiha team. Iruka got to his feet and bowed to the kids in front of him, saying, "Well, your Jonin senseis will be here shortly. Give them hell," he thought as he walked out of the room, leaving the teenagers to converse and consider their futures as Konoha shinobi. A group of Jonin enter as the door slides open. Everyone was staring at the genin seated in front of them. There was disappointment in some of the teams they had received, as evidenced by something in their eyes. Even so, the academy continued to train them as though they were in combat. They did take it easy, and some of them appeared to still require some time to prepare to be shinobi in this dynamic world. Before Ryoko showed up in front of them with a silver-haired man in her hands, each Jonin summoned their team. In a sickly sweet voice, she said, "Now Kakashi. You weren't planning to be late now were you?" The man's face was only slightly paler than what was visible. His voice was laced with fear as he said, "No Ryoko-sama. I was just making my way here." Ryoko smiles at him and asks, "Then why did I find you sitting in a tree out front just reading your book?" It was true that Kakashi wanted to observe his future students, whom he might or might not fail, so he said, "I was just waiting for the room to clear out some more. For there was too many people in here and I wanted to watch my students a little more." Ryoko gave him another smile and nodded her head. "I just want to let you know. If I hear you are late for any team training or anything, you will be answering to me and the old man will be damned for I still outrank your ass." She yelled at him at the end. The two silver-haired individuals in front of them caused everyone in the room to take a huge step back. With tears streaming down his face, Kakashi replied, "Yes, Ryoko-sama." He was afraid to even put his team to the test. He believes it would be better for his health to simply pass them here and now. He sobbed as he escaped Ryoko's grasp and fled, saying, "Come Team 7. Let's head to the missions office for our first mission." Ryoko waved to him and her grandson, grinning. Her grandson ran after his frightened sensei, and she called after him, "Have fun Naru-chan." As he led his students to the Hokage's tower, Kakashi glanced over his shoulder. He wasn't sure if he was correct to let them skip the test. However, it would not go well even if Ryoko were to take Naruto on as her apprentice. Because of a poison he made not too long ago, the teenager is already in the bingo book. Naruto looked at the back of the silver-haired man's head and said, "So you truly do fear my grandmother?" Looking over his shoulder at his pupil, Kakashi remarked, "Well, if you three didn't pass the test I gave you, who's not saying that Ryoko-sama wouldn't have taken you on as her apprentice?" Naruto gives this a nod. He closed his eyes, folded his arms across his chest, and nodded his head in agreement. "Well, more likely I would have become the apprentice to my great-grandmother Washu as she has been playing with the idea of taking on a genin team." To this, Kakashi simply paled even more. Washu, the insane scientist, and her genin group. She last experienced one at the first SWW. On the battlefield, she had instilled fear in those who harbored bijus and caused them to flee. As he put his book away, he remarked, "Well, we can't have a repeat of her last genin team." Sasuke and Sakura appeared somewhat perplexed by this, and Naruto grinned. Naruto turned to face his two teammates and remarked, "Her team was very deadly and way stronger than our Sannin." They both appeared shocked by this and simply nodded their heads. He saw the shock on their faces and said, "Yeah, they took on 3 bijus with no trouble. It was when the 4th biju that joined in the battle that they finally fell." Asking Sasuke, "Then why isn't she training us?" would provide him with the straight he would require later. As she floated on her pillow beside them, Washu said, "That is because my darling little Tsunami will not allow me to." Naruto waved and smiled and said, "Hey grandma." Washu grinned at them and said, "Hello, my Naru-chan." As the man turned his head away from her and raised his right hand to scratch his right cheek, she asked, "So did you pass your team test?" Kakashi laughed nervously and said, "I passed them on the spot." Naruto grinned and closed his eyes as he said, "He passed us and didn't test us on how well we work together as a team. I think Grandma Ryoko scared him half to death dropping him off at the academy." Kakashi squinted at his student with the silver, blonde hair. He asked him, "How did you know what the test you were?" Sakura said, "That is easy. All genin teams are made up of 4-man cells. There is no genin teams with only 3 or 2 members." Sasuke nodded his head and smiled. Kakashi gives them a single finger wave and says, "Well, that is good, you know what the meaning of the test was. But remember this, those who abandon their mission are trash. But those who abandon their teammates, friends, scum worse than trash." Washu said, "He does have a point. You don't want to be like your great aunt Akaya." Naruto went pale when he thought about the pampered princess with the purple hair at his house. Naruto appeared irritated and asked, "Speaking of the spoiled princess, has she gone yet?" Washu shook her head and said, "No. I am having a few issues." Sakura gives the darker Pinkett a perplexed look. After learning in the academy that the Uzumaki clan had been exterminated during SWW2, she asked, somewhat perplexed, "You have visiting family?" Washu smirked at them and said, "She is the sister of Tsunami that just dropped out of the air." At this, they simply nodded their heads. Naruto crossed his arms over his chest and complained, "Yeah, the witches wants us to leave her and go back home with her. I don't like her nor the fool she is married to. I don't even want to meet my spoiled-ass great cousin." He replied, "Don't worry Naru-chan, we are not leaving here. It would have to take several armies to drag us kicking and scream out of this village," said Washu with a chuckle. As Washu's words caused his teammates and sensei to go pale, Naruto said, "Good." Washu grinned as they reached the Hokage Tower. She informed Naruto and the others, "Well, I'm off. You know dealing council BS with your other great-grandmother." Naruto gave Washu a hug and said, "Okay. Love you." She gave him the same hug in return and went upstairs to the council chambers to deal with all the idiots who had nothing better to bitch about. After giving his adorable little Genin a quick glance, Kakashi led them to the mission desk on the first floor. The Chunin, who was seated behind the desk, watched in disbelief as he saw Kakashi Hatake with a Genin team. In the hopes that this might be a genjutsu, he flared his chakra and blinked his eyes multiple times, but it wasn't. It was real what he was witnessing. Hell had really frozen over, and tonight the devil would probably be visiting Konoha to gather some souls. Kakashi grinned lazily at the man in front of him and said, "Team 7 here for their first mission." The still stunning Chunin replied, Yeah, sure. We only have fence painting right now as Team Guy took the Tora mission just 10 minutes ago." As he looked at his adorable little Genin and took the scroll to review the mission details, Kakashi said, "That will be fine." As his students scowled at him and complained under their breathers about squandering their abilities and skills on village chores, he informed them, "It looks like the academy needs the fence painted and that will be our first team mission before we move up on mission." As both of his teammates nodded their heads in agreement, Naruto turned to face the Chunin behind the desk and said, "Okay. The sooner we finish this, the quicker we finish our 30D ranks. We get our first C rank." As he and his teammates turned to go, he told the man, "Have another one ready for us. For we will be back soon." A stunned Kakashi just stood there like a stunned fool. He breaks out of it, follows his team, and completes providing the location of all the supplies. The Uzumaki compound. Ayaka explores the house, taking in everything, and discovers photos of Minato and Kushina. She looks at the picture of Kushina's horrified eyes. She turns to face Tenchi, who is sitting on the couch and doesn't want to be a snoop, and remarks, "That woman. She looks like Ryoko." Tenchi sighed in defeat and looked down at his hands, saying, "Well, like they said, they have been gone for a long time. So Ryoko must have gotten married and had children. I ought to have taken action to prevent their departure." He sighs again, thinking, "I should have confronted Ayaka and told her to stop her bridezilla act. I had missed out on a lot of his friends' lives." From the doorway, Ryoko said, "Yes. I was married a long time ago. She was my daughter." The woman with silver hair enters the house and settles into an armchair across from Ayaka and Tenchi, who both turn to stare at her. Tenchi wanted to know, so he asked, "Wada, what happened to your husband?" Because Sasami's husband was the only man he saw residing here. Ryoko's lips form a gentle smile as a distant gaze fills her eyes as she considers her beloved. He was murdered before the Second Great Shinobi War. Just hours before sending our daughter off to his sister Mito. It all happened while I was away on a mission to get information on the attacking forces. It appeared one of their shinobi got onto the island and snuck into the Uzukage Tower, and while his back was turned the bastard slit his throat. She explained to them. Ayaka's face was filled with horror, while Tenchi's was filled with shock. Ryoko laughed softly and without emotion. He did something right though. He sent our daughter away before she could suffer his fate, for she was always in the tower with him while I was on missions or with Washu in her lab always training. As she wanted to follow in her mother's footsteps and be a devil on the battlefield. She said as she gazed at the picture of her daughter next to the fireplace. Ayaka asked, unsure if she wanted to know, "What happened to your daughter?" She did, however, have a curiosity. Well, she came here and was with Ryo Oki after the fall of Uzushino and became a kunoichi of this village. Fell in love and got married after fighting in the Third Great Shinobi World War. But sadly I was too late getting her. For she was murdered after giving birth to Naruto. The night of his birth he lost both his parents and became the jailer of the Kyubi no Kitsune. Ryoko said with a sorrowful expression on her lips. Mura, murder. Ayaka asks. Yeah, for she was the jailer for the QB before her son and the man that killed her. Wanted the beast that she held within her. We got there as she was dying and made us promise to raise Naruto and love him. He is my hope and sunshine and I would destroy the world for him. Ryoko said as she gazed at Ayaka and Tenchi. Ayaka looked at the floor and said, I'm sorry to hear that. She looked away from Ryoko because she felt embarrassed about asking them to come back right away. Because they have a purpose for being here, and neither she nor even her father could force them to leave right now. Tenchi looked at Ryoko and said, we should have never come then. After a long day, Ryoko said, yeah, pretty much you have wasted your time coming here. So go back to your father Ayaka and tell him we are never returning. Not even he nor his armies can make us return. She got up, stretched her neck and back, and went into the kitchen to prepare some food. Tenchi turns to face Ayaka, who turns her head away from him. Said tells him, we have to do something. Tenchi got up and walked to his wife, saying, no. This is their life. We can't do anything anymore. Ayaka asks, then what do I tell our father? As Tsunami enters the living room, she says, you tell him we have moved on with our lives and I am no longer Sasami but Tsunami. She never took her eyes off the couple. Ayaka wanted to know, so she asked, this is the life you choose? Tsunami gives a nod, yes, this is my home and everything that is important to me is here. My family is here and I'm not leaving them or forcing them to leave here. For Naruto wants to follow in his father's and grandfather's footsteps and become a cage of this village. She replies to her sister. Ayaka tells her sister, he is a crowned prince of Jirai. That is a prouder title than this cage thing. Tsunami gives a headshake. No it isn't. For cage you work your ass off for it. It is a title you earn. It isn't something you are born into or given. It is something that is earned. That is what he wants. She replies to her sister. Besides I don't think he would know what to do as a prince as he is too down to earth. He is like a mini Ryoko and Washu mixed along with his great-grandfather. She grinned. As she hoped this would work, Ayaka said, but he can do a lot of great things as a prince as well. Tsunami gives another shake of her head. No, but it wouldn't be what he wants. He is a warrior and wouldn't want to be a prince as he gets annoyed when people add Sama to his name and try to treat him like a prince. She replied to her sister. She seemed shocked by this. That was a thought she had never heard of before. Because she was accustomed to people constantly wanting to be royalty. Tsunami looked up at the picture of her granddaughter and her husband and said, well, that is my Naru-chan. He isn't like normal people. He just wants to be a normal kid and be a shinobi and later on Hokage of this village just like his father. Academy of Shinobi. Sasuke and Naruto exchanged scowls. Naruto glared at the boy with the raven hair in front of him, growling, Tem you're in my way. Sasuke glares at the boy in front of him and growls, I don't care dope. I was here before you. Sakura, growing weary of the two fighting over who was there first, said, Sasuke-kun. Naruto. That is enough. Kakashi approaches them both and gives them a smile. You two need to work together for if we are not done soon. We will never get the 30D ranks we need to move on to the first C rank you wish to have soon. He stated this to male pupils. Naruto smirks, crosses his fingers, and creates 30 more clones of himself using their own paintbrushes before Sasuke scuffs and moves to another wall. Kakashi was shocked to see his student use shadow clones and create so many of them. His mouth was hanging open from beneath his mask, and his lone eye was wide with shock. What the devil? He asks himself. I won't question this, you know that. As he wanted to return to his book, he told himself, Uzumakis are devils. 1 month after Ayaka and Tenchi had arrived in Konoha, it was 3 in the morning. Washu was standing outside the house, wiping her hands with a greasy rag. She told herself, I'm finally finished this ship. Beside his grandmother, Naruto leaps out of his window. He said, hey grandma. Washu turned to face him and arched an eyebrow. She turned to face the completed spaceship and said, Morning Naru-chan. What are you doing up this early? Naruto looked at the spaceship and said, I just woke up for Grandma Ryoko will be waking me up in 1 hour to train and this give me time to meditate before training and work with my chakra flow. As they boarded the spaceship, Washu said, I see. Well it is good to see you. I just finished this spaceship and I was going to go in and see if I can send a message to your great-grandfather. As he followed her, Naruto said, okay. This will be fun. Once on board, As the ship's central tree comes alive with her energy, Washu guides Naruto to the command center. The computer said, "Greetings Washu-sama." Washu asks, "Are you able to connect with the palace of Jirai?" "Yes, Washu-sama. There is several messages from the king for Princess Ayaka." The AI replied. Washu said, unconcerned, "Well, save the messages for Ayaka. I just wish to speak with the king." The AI said, "As you wish Washu-sama." Jirai Planet, Palace of Jiraiyan. In front of the king of Jirai, a screen appears. A girl with pink hair and a boy with blonde hair appear on the flickering black screen. A man with black hair and black eyes on the opposite side of the screen glares at the woman in front of him. Washu grinned and said, "Your Highness." The Azusa Masaki Jirai said, "Washu-sama. Where are my daughters?" With a playful pout, Washu asks, "I see you are not worried about myself or Ryoko." Her antics caused Naruto to snort. He said, "Grandma." Azusa's gaze was drawn to the boy with silver and blonde hair as a result. He questioned, "Who's the boy Washu?" This time, Washu grinned. "This is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the grandson of Tsunami Uzumaki and Ryu Uzumaki. He is my grandson as his mother is Ryoko and his father is Seto, the son of Tsunami Uzumaki and Ryu Uzumaki," she stated to him. Azusa's shocked eyes enlarge. He asks, "Tsunami, Sasami has finally become the goddess?" Washu said, "Yes, my youngest has had a family. Does any of her other children still live?" he inquired. Washu's face is shadowed by her pink bangs. "No, her son died before our home village fell in the Second Shinobi War. Her daughter died of old age. But her son did have one child with Ryoko, and her daughter went on to live in a new village that is our new home. But Ryoko's daughter died on the night of Naruto's birth. But her daughter married the leader of this village and had several children. But all her children died in the Third Shinobi War but for a great-granddaughter. But before you ask, that granddaughter is running around drinking and being stupid," she replied. Azusa's eyes were filled with tears and shock. Seeing the look on their husband's face, his wives ascended the stairs to the thrones. Masaki Jirai asks, "What's wrong?" while Funaho grips her sister-wife's arm. Azusa glances at his two wives to his left. He informs them that Sasami has finally become Tsunami. When Funaho hears this, she starts to cry. In between sobs, she says, "My baby." As Washu hears the king of Jirai's more sentimental wife, he sighs. "Well, I'm just telling you that we are not returning back to Jirai or Earth. But we are sending Tenchi and Ayaka to you though," she stated to them. Funaho moved to face the screen. "But why?" she exclaimed. At this, Washu's right eye started to twitch. She told the overly sentimental woman who was behaving like a child, "Because we have lives here. Tsunami is the Hokage of this village and our grandson is a shinobi of this village." The entire time, Naruto was giggling as he gazed at the woman with the sky blue hair. The purple black-haired woman simply yanks the woman away from the screen. Masaki looks at Naruto with honey brown eyes and asks, "I apologize for that, Washu-sama. But who is this young man standing next to you?" Naruto smiles. He declared, "I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." "Naruto!" exclaimed Ryoko as she entered the area they were in and wandered around the spaceship. Ryoko grinned at the two and said, "I knew I felt you two here." The voice from the screen said, "Ryoko." Ryoko turns to face the screen and sees Funaho, Masaki, and their spouse beneath them. Ryoko twitches her right eye. She asks, "Not you again. What do you want?" Naruto knew this would not go well, so he said, "Hey grandma, I didn't see what time it was and I'm not going to have time to train with you if we stay here longer." Ryoko turns to face Naruto. "You're right, Naru-chan. Also, I believe today is going to be the day for your first C-rank mission today," she stated to him. This made Naruto glow. "Yeah," he cheered, "I can't wait." After saying that, Ryoko and Naruto both departed the spaceship to begin their morning training. Washu turned to face the three on the screen. As she pressed a button and shut off the screen, she informed them, "We will be sending off Ayaka and Tenchi later today and several gifts for all of you. But I must go, have a nice day." Office of the Konoha Hokage. As they discussed their granddaughter, Ryu asked, "Well, Tsunami-chan, what do you want to do about Tsunade?" Tsunami looked up from the minimal amount of paperwork she needed to complete and said, "I'm not sure. For now let's just see my sister off." In search of presents for their kids and their family, Ayaka and Tenchi wandered the village. Ayaka asked, holding up a child-sized fox mask, "Tenchi, doesn't this look cute?" Tenchi searches for the rubber kunai pack. He grinned and looked at the fox mask, saying, "Oh yeah, that is cute." A cat adheres to the top of Naruto's head as he runs by. He yelled, "Get this damn cat off of my head." As their great nephew ran past them, Ayaka and Tenchi both blinked. They saw a man with silver hair walk past them, grinning, and two other young teenagers chase after him. Tenchi swiftly followed them after paying for the goods in his and his wife's hands. As they entered the Hokage Tower and ascended the stairs to the Hokage office, they could still hear Naruto shouting about something. With a loud, bombing voice, Naruto declared, "Grandma, that is our 30th D rank mission. We are ready for our first C rank mission." Tsunami laughed. With a playful smile, she said to him, "Well, my dear. I am glad you and your teammates have finished your first 30 missions before all those in your graduating class." Tenchi rapped on the open door. When Tsunami turned to face the open door, she saw Tenchi and her sister standing there. Tenchi nodded his head and grabbed Ayaka's hand before she could say anything, telling them to stop and talk to her sister. "Come in and have a seat on the couch. I am in the middle of a mission briefing at the moment." They waited while seated on the couch. "Well, Kakashi-chan, do you think your team is ready for their first C-rank mission?" Tsunami asked, laughing at the silver-haired man's blush beneath his mask as a result of her making fun of him. Kakashi's eye smiles as he clears his throat. He informed her, "Yes, Lady Hokage-sama. I think they are." Tsunami gave a nod in agreement. She called out to the Anbu in the hallway, "Good. For I have a mission from the land of Wave. Please show in Tazuna." Jirai Planet. Next to Tenio, a teenage girl stood with her head lowered, staring at the ground as she stepped into the shadows. Azusa, who is observing his granddaughter and Tenchi's oldest sister, asks, "Tenio, what brings you here?" Standing alongside Ayaka and Tenchi's oldest daughter, Tenio looked up at her grandfather and his two brides and said, "Grandfather, I noticed that Tsunami-sama has a grandson and I was not permitted to choose the wife for Tenchi. Therefore, permit me to choose the future bride for Tsunami-sama's grandson." Azusa narrowed his eyes at the young woman in front of him and his two beautiful wives, saying, "My dear, it will not be as easy as you believe." The young woman standing next to Tenio asked, "Why do you say that, grandfather?" Gazing at his granddaughter, Azusa looks. He explained to his other granddaughter, because of whom his other grandmothers are. Tenio moved forward. As she was interrupted, she said, "But grandfather." Masaki smirked at her granddaughter and said, "I don't think Ryoko-sama and Washu-sama will let you arrange an arranged marriage for their grandson." Tenio said, "Buddha," before being interrupted again. The girl with lavender hair and pearl eyes with black pupils said, "I think Auntie Sasami would allow me to marry her grandson." The young girl smiled at Masaki, who said, "I don't believe this will fly with them, my dear Aki-chan." The Konoha gates. A shiver went down Naruto's spine as he turned to face the village and saw Ayaka and her obnoxious husband shopping. He sighed and thought, "I have a bad feeling they are going to bring me my future doom." Sakura and Sasuke turned to face their teammate, who was frowning at the two individuals he was observing. When they met the two, they both expressed how much they detested Ayaka. Sasuke wanted them gone by the time they returned to the village, so he asked, "So when are those two leaving?" Naruto turned to face his obnoxious companion. He turned back to face the two gate guards who were yawning and simply leafing through a magazine. "Not too soon. I think they will be leaving in a day or two," he said. All he did was roll his eyes. Kakashi and an elderly man approached. He grinned and said, "I am happy to see my adorable little genin prepared for our first C-rank mission." The Uzumaki estate. Looking at her scolded husband, Ayaka asks, "Tenchi, do you think the kids will enjoy all the presents we bought them?" Tenchi grinned and said, "Yeah, I think they will enjoy everything we got them. Also that kimono we got Aki-chan." Ryoko carries a backpack as she passes them. Tenchi asked the woman with silver hair as she passed them, "Where are you heading to, Ryoko?" Ryoko pauses and looks back at the pair. She turned around and Ryo-oki jumped on her shoulder before they took off, saying, "I am heading out. Tsunami has added me to Naru-chan's mission. For something is off about this mission they have taken on." Tenchi could only say, "Oh," before disappearing into thin air. Washu approached the two people making their way to the house. She smirked and asked, "Did you two enjoy your shopping trip?" Ayaka smiled and said, "Yes. They have many lovely things in this village." Washu gave a head nod. She laughed and turned to return to the house, saying, "We have also gotten gifts for everyone as well." So I do hope they enjoy them. As a few of the items we are sending are gifts we have received from IWA. Tenchi asked, hurrying to catch up to the woman with the pink hair. What do you mean? Washu glanced at the two over his shoulder. Well, IWA gives us monthly gifts to keep Ryoko or myself from destroying their village. As Ryoko's late son-in-law did wipe out their army of 3,000 in just 10 minutes on his own. As well as her late daughter as well took out 4 armies of 5,000 each on her own as well in the last SWW. She replied with a smirk on her face. At the rear of the Pinkett that disappeared into the house, they both gave each other foolish looks. The mindscape of Naruto. Kurama also felt uneasy that Ayaka and the other family, whom his kit had never met, would not bring him anything positive. Kurama sat in the open cage that led to a lovely forest and said, Kit, just be careful, that purple hair spoiled brat is going to rain down trouble on us. Knowing that nothing positive would result from them leaving or even from ever finding them, Naruto said, yeah, I get that same feeling as well. Jirai. Tenio turns to face her grandparents. She told them, but it would be good to strengthen our family. I worry that this will not go your way, Tenio. Azusa replied. The woman with silver hair simply squints at her grandfather. As she was attempting to shift her own weight, she growled, I am sure that my father would agree with this. Azusa snarled, you will not act like an entitled brat tennyo. As he got to his feet and faced his granddaughter, she retreated with a trembling step. But grandfather, with tears welling up in the corners of her eyes, she attempted to tell him as the other girl fled from them after learning that she would wed one of her Aunt Sasami's children. Combat. Ryoko shows up in front of the two demon brothers after they attempted to murder her grandson. Hurling at them, she said, I think you two screwed up. They retreated a great distance. The Silver Devil, exclaimed both of them. Said smiled and said, the one and only Ryoko Uzumaki, the silver-haired devil of Uzu no Kuni and Konoha. After exchanging glances, the two men disappeared in a whirlpool of water, to escape the inevitable death that awaits them if they remain there like sitting ducks. The Land of Waves. A man wearing a small navy business suit, black sunglasses, and gray bushy hair with a balding spot in the middle stood about 3 feet 2 inches tall. Well, Zabuza, do you think the two you sent off will be able to handle to the bridge builder? Asked the individual. A man with icy black eyes and bandages around his face narrows his eyes at the man seated in front of him. Looking at the person wearing a white mask with their hair pulled up in a bun and covered in a white cloth, he said, they will do fine. I trained the demon brothers. But they will never be on the same level as Haku. The masked figure said, don't worry. Zabuza-sama has trained them well. With his hand folded over his big desk, the small man nods his head and reclines in his big black leather chair. Zabuza got to his feet. I will be heading out to check on them. He replied. Haku Tree and Zabuza leapt to their covert base. Haku said, Zabuza-sama. Zabuza growled, what is it, Haku? Confused and frightened, Haku glanced at his master. The closet-hidden shinobi village to the Land of Wave is the hidden leaf. He stated. With a hint of irritation in his voice, Zabuza questioned, what point are you trying to make, Haku? Isn't that the same village the silver-haired devil and the mad scientist live in? Haku asks. Just before their secret base, Zabuza froze in mid-jump and landed on a tree branch. The demon brothers were standing outside, looking scared. Zabuza looked at the two cowardly idiots and said, yes, both those women live there. He gave the order, report. The other brother trembled in sheer terror at the thought of actually meeting the legend. The silver-haired devil of Uzu no Kuni and Konoha is on this mission and I believe we attacked her child. Zabuza leapt to the platform the treehouse was standing on and said, well, things just got complicated and this mission isn't worth it. He said to those who follow him, we will stay here and see what the troll does and if he can make a move that will befit us. Then we will move. After giving a nod, they entered the treehouse. A Gato spy was leaning against a tree in the shadows. A shinobi who aspires to be the greatest of the best. So the bloody mist demon is afraid of women. That's absurd, he thought to himself as he disappeared into a cloud whirl. The boundary between the Land of Fire and the Land of Wave. Ryoko, floating in front of the man on the little boat that seemed to transport them across the narrow stretch of sea in front of them all, said, Naruto and I will fly over and keep an eye out in the air for any attacks. The client, Kakashi, Sakura, and Sasuke got into the little boat. Kakashi gave the silver-haired woman a quick smile and said, all right, I'll leave our safety in your hands, Ryoko-sama. Ryoko smiles. Don't worry, brat. I'll leave you something to play with, she said to him. As his two other students settled in for the next 45 minutes, Kakashi simply nodded his head and pulled out his book to read. Ryoko looks at Naruto from above, out of earshot. She told her grandson, "You did well for your first out-of-village mission." Naruto glanced back at his grandmother after glancing down at his hands. "If you hadn't shown up, I think we would have fallen. For Kakashi-sensei is good. But they had speed and experience that the Tem and I do not have. Granted, I have the speed and I can fly. But sooner or later I would have to come down and they would have gotten me, and if I had taken the client and tried to get away, I would have left my teammates to their own deaths." He stated that she was feeling weak and ineffective. Ryoko pulled her grandson into an embrace and said, "I am glad you understand, even with Kurama sealed within you, that you are still human and still are able to die." Naruto saw a man strolling along the shore and said, "I know. I will never take life for granted ever again." It was Ryoko who saw the man. He was dressed as a shinobi from Ami, or a small shinobi village, and his long black hair was pulled up in a high ponytail. She informed the boy, "Looks like we have someone waiting for us." Naruto said, "Yeah, and it isn't Zabuza." He couldn't figure out why the demon of the bloody mist wasn't there to welcome them. Just a second before, Gato asks, "So Zabuza is scared of some woman?" The man grinned. The man said, "It looks like he is." "Well, I can't have that. I want you to kill the bridge builder and the team protecting him and then take out Zabuza," Gato was told. As he disappeared in a cloud of smoke, the man said, "As you wish." The coastline. As he landed on the water and approached the man from out of the mist, Naruto said, "Hello." The man gave the child a sly smile. With the same dark smirk, he said, "Hey kid. Have you seen my kid? He was playing around here." Naruto looked at the man with his head tilted to the right and said, "Funny. I did not see any kids around here. But I can smell old and dry blood on you. So you know I'm not a poor fisherman?" he asks, maintaining his sinister grin. Naruto gave a snort. He said to the man in front of him, "I can see a shinobi a mile away. You're not fooling anyone with that story as well. You are dressed as a shinobi." He informed the silver blonde in front of him, "It seems Konoha is finally training excellent shinobi for once." Even though he knew the man was trying to bully him into a fight, Naruto maintained his composure and said, "They have always trained excellent shinobi." Asked the man, "So boy, where are your teammates?" Naruto glanced behind him. He informed the man, "They are still about 3 miles out." As his hand moved slowly behind him, he asked, "Then why are you here alone?" Naruto remarked, "You could say I am their scout." The boat. Before Kakashi, Ryoko shows up. Naruto is checking out a person on the shoreline. "So if things go south, be ready to move quickly, Kakashi," she stated. As he flips through the pages of his small orange book, Kakashi simply nods. "We will, Ryoko-sama." Ryoko then disappears to go watch her grandson engage in combat. Sasuke gives Kakashi a look. "How can the dope fly and why does his grandmother fly?" he asked. The silver-haired man is now the center of attention. Kakashi sighed. "To be honest, I do not know. All I know is that Ryoko-sama and her family are not of our world. They are special and can do things we are not able to do," he stated. Sasuke is unable to see through the dense mist, so he simply glares at the sea in front of him. Standing in front of the smirking man, Naruto said, "You know your sensei was a fool for allowing a wet behind-the-ears genin ahead of his team." Gazing at the man with a naive smile, Naruto said, "I don't think I would say that about my sensei." The silver blonde's words caused the man to scoff. His hand crept closer to the pouch on his back as he asked, "Tell me, boy. Who's your sensei?" Now, Naruto grinned at the man in front of him. With a laugh in his voice, he asks, "Which sensei would you like to know the name of?" As he stood there, blinking at the boy in front of him, the man stopped his hand. Now making fun of the boy, he asks, "What kind of loser has more than one sensei?" Naruto glares at the man in front of him while pouting. The man with black hair laughed and said, "Fine boy. Tell me whose your senseis are." Naruto gives a head nod. The man, who was now pale because he knew the names, said, "All right, you asked for it. There is my great-grandfather Ryu Uzumaki, great-grandmother Tsunami Uzumaki, the Hokage of Konoha, great-grandmother Washu the mad scientist, grandmother Ryoko Uzumaki, Jiraiya of the Sannin, and Kakashi Hatake of Team 7. He thought they were all dead except for 2 of them, so he was shocked to learn that the goddess Tsunami was now the Hokage of Konoha. How have they survived? He had heard tales about the 4 Uzu warriors from his father and grandfather, so he asked as he stepped back. At this point, Ryoko materialized in front of the man and mockingly said, "It is amazing what one could do with seals." She simply floated in front of the idiot and her grandson. So this is why Zabuza was scared of fighting this woman. "But I will make a name for myself if I kill the bitch," the man said, stepping back from the devil floating in front of him. He grinned as he swiftly reached into his pouch and pulled out several kunai and seals. Zabuza and Haku had unknowingly mowed the idiot who was spying on them. He is only at Genin level, and if he's lucky, he might be at low Chunin level. He looks down at Haku, who has removed his to watch the battle that will take place in a few minutes, and says, but he doesn't stand a chance against the woman before him. "All right, lady, I have no idea who you are. My name is Kim Ju. My hometown is Amy." With a smile on his face, Kim said, "Pain-sama trusted me to come and handle this mission from his own private shinobi." He hoped that the woman in front of him would be afraid of his name. "Are you not a missing shinobi from some minor village?" Naruto asked, rolling his eyes at the man in front of him. He questioned the idiot in front of him. "Yes," Kim said, grinning at the boy in front of him. "However, that village lacked strength and was unable to provide me with what I would ever desire. If this bitch can be killed before me." With an arrogant expression on his face, he said, "I can join Pain-sama's private guards." "All right, young boy. There are only 3 Sannin in our world, so you would have to be stronger than 1 to defeat me. You won't ever take me out, then. Because I am certain that neither Jiraiya nor the other 2 would accept your feeble ass as a pupil," Ryoko remarked. At this point, Kakashi and the other members of Team 7 appeared, and he observed the devil in front of them and the man in front of his pupil. "Dope, are you already in trouble?" Sasuke can be seen grinning as he asks. "No Tem," Naruto said, turning to face his teammate. "When we landed here, he was going to attack us," he informed the boy with the raven hair. Sasuke crossed his arms over his flat chest and said, "Whatever, loser." Naruto laughed because Sasuke occasionally acted too much like a girl. As he turned back to face the fool, Naruto said, "Just shut up Tem and allow my grandma to handle this fool." Kim attempted to grab Naruto and pull a kunai to the boy's neck, but something strange and frightening happened. Naruto was frightened by the man and leapt into the sky close to his grandmother. Ryoko hissed at the jerk who had just attempted to use her grandson as a shield, narrowing her eyes and saying, "You just sign your own death warrant." Kim went pale when he noticed an odd orange beam of light in her right hand, glaring at the man in front of her. "What the hell are you?" he demanded, his voice now laced with fear. Before attacking the idiot in front of her, Ryoko's eyes shifted to the forest and she noticed the 2 people who had been observing the death of Gato's little pet. "I am the devil and you are going to pay with your soul." Ryoko smirked at him. Zabuza looked at Haku and said, "We need to leave and get out of here." He froze for a moment, sensing her eyes on him and seeing his death. They both retreated into one of Haku's mirrors and disappeared from the silver woman's view after he nodded his head. Before Sasuke and Sakura realized what had happened, the man who had attempted to capture Naruto was on the ground, having sliced through the middle of his body with her energy sword. This prevented the blood from splattering out and covering everyone in front of them. "What the hell?" Sakura, who had never seen a dead body before, cried out and turned away from the scene. Sasuke froze, his eyes widening as he experienced flashbacks to the night when he learned that his father and several other clansmen had perished. He was terrified and unsure of what to do. "You must look after those 2 brats," Ryoko said, hastily securing the boy and turning to face Kakashi. She hissed at the silver-haired man, who was even shocked in his own right, saying, "This isn't the reaction they should be having after seeing a kill happen." "Yes, Ryoko-sama." Kakashi nodded and hurried over to his 2 terrified pupils. He turned to Naruto, who handled this better, and asked, "How are you handling this so well, Naruto?" He asks his pupil a question. "I had my first kill a long time ago," Naruto said, grinning sadly as he looked up at his sensei. He said, turning away from his sensei and team, "So I already have these reactions and freakouts like the others." "Boss, boss," a man screamed as he dashed into Gato's office, panting, and collapsed to the ground. "What is it?" Gato asked, glancing over his big oak desk at the thug panting on the ground in front of him. He asked, looking irritated because he wanted to spend time with his new little toy that his boys had just brought him and didn't want to be bothered. "The man you hired to kill the bridge builder and then Zabuza is dead," the thug said, dropping back to his knees. His face was filled with fear as he said, "He was killed." Gato growled, growing irritated with this bastard in front of him. "Who killed him?" From behind the troll, a woman's voice said, "That would be me." A woman with long silver hair pulled back into a ponytail, golden cat-like eyes, and a devilish smile was standing behind him when Gato slowly turned his chair so that he couldn't even look up to see who it was. Who are you?" Gato stammered, his voice laced with fear as he was about to urinate, and his men retreated because they knew who the woman in front of them was, knew they had no chance against her, and realized their boss was fighting the devil alone. With a charming yet sinister smile, Ryoko said, "I am Ryoko Uzumaki." When Gato heard the woman's name, he turned pale. "Rai Ryoko." His voice was frantic as he spoke. "Please, help me, assist me, I'm not interested in being raped." A young woman's screams came from a room next to the office, whose door was open. Ryoko's now frozen eyes went to the open door to see a young woman with crimson and silver hair lying on a bed, pulling on the chains that hold her, with only the sheets on the bed surrounding her. Her violet eyes met the woman's, who was now staring at her, and her face was stained with tears. Ryoko Ni-chan. When the woman realized who it was, she sobbed. When Uzu had fallen, this girl was a child. She had just escaped from her family and had been thought dead for a long time until this very moment. As an orange energy sword materialized in her right hand and her gaze gradually shifted to the troll directly beneath her, Ryoko whispered, "Little Gallia." Another woman appeared beside her, and she gave the order, "Ryo-oki, go and help Gallia." Ryo-oki said, "Meow." She disappeared into the room, shutting the door behind her, and screams echoed from behind it as Ryo-oki began to take off the girl's chains and find clothes for her to wear. "Oki Ryo." Before the odd little creature departed with the island princess and headed for the hidden leaf, Gallia had only ever seen the cabin once in her life. The devil woman's horror of destroying Gato's hideout, freeing all the enslaved women and children, killing all the thugs, destroying all the drugs, sealing away all the weapons and money she had found, along with all the food and drink, was witnessed by Zabuza and his student from the shadows. Jewels would be added to her personal collection, and she would keep the fine silks and clothing she liked for herself, while giving the rest away to the villagers. "Did you really need to burn the place down to the ground?" Naruto asks, glancing up at his grandmother. Before everyone else, he asked her to gaze at the now burnt earth. "Yes, I did," Ryoko says, turning to face her grandson. Said informed him, "He had one of our own." At this, Naruto froze. He had an Uzumaki in his hands. He asks. "Yes," Ryoko said, nodding her head in agreement. "I couldn't let that little bastard rape the girl," she said, clenching her fist. Naruto nodded his head in agreement and turned to face the girl sitting with his teammates, who was chatting and holding a now child-sized Ryo-oki in her lap. "I'm glad you saved her. How did you come to know that frightful woman?" Sakura asked, glancing at the girl who was holding Ryo-oki in her lap. "Ryoko-sama was the wife of our late Uzukage before our village fell back in the Second War," Gallia said, blinking as she turned to face the Pinkett. "But when I last saw her, I was a young child, maybe 3 or 4 years old," she informed the girl. "But that would make you in your late 20s or early 30s, Sakura says, her eyes widening. "However, you appear to be around our age," she said, her voice sounded shocked. "Well, when Naruto turns 16, he will start to age slowly and will also pass for a teenager for a while," Gallia grinned. "Washu-sama is several thousand years old, while Ryoko-sama is several hundred years old," she remarked, observing their eyes enlarge. "They didn't need to know that," Naruto chuckled. He told the woman beside him, "You know. I am aware. However, it's entertaining to see how people react when they discover the truth," Gallia remarked. Ryoko approached them and said, "So kids, what are you discussing?" She questioned them. With a smile, Gallia said to the elderly woman, "You and Howie Uzumaki's age so slowly." After blinking, Ryoko simply laughed and said, "Well, you're only a quarter of our bloodline. So you were well aged by your bloodline." She told her, laughing, "Since Naruto is half, he will age more slowly than you." "So it is true what she told us?" they asked, staring at the silver-haired woman with wide eyes. Sakura asked, her mouth hanging open. With a deadpan expression, Ryoko replied, "Yes." Sakura said, averting her gaze, "That is shocking. Hey brat, do you think you could make a few more of those clones?" Naruto asked, running around the bridge with his shadow clones to assist the other workers. The elderly inebriated man, lacking a few more employees, yelled. Looking up from his work, Naruto said to the elderly man, "Yeah, I can make about 5 more before I get sick from when they go up in smoke." He was lying because he didn't want anyone to know how many clones he could actually make. Why is he lying to the old drunk? He can make millions of clones, Ryoko asks herself as she turns away from the brats and starts to walk toward Naruto, knowing that her grandson was lying through his teeth. Ryoko called out, "Naruto." He rushed to her after admiring her and asked, "What's up, Grandma?" He questioned her. "Why did you lie to him about how many clones you can make?" She asked, casting a worried glance down at him. She asks him a question. He laughed and put his right hand behind his head. He said, turning to face his teammates behind her. "I don't want them to know how much I can do." He turned back to face her. "I understand," Ryoko said, nodding her head. She informed him that sensei of yours hasn't done anything to put any faith in me regarding your team and himself. Naruto simply nodded, turned, and resumed his work. Ryoko stood over Naruto, grinning, and said, "I am shocked you have fallen so quickly." Her sword had vanished from view as Naruto fell to the ground, exhausted but still able to move. "It's only been 3 days since we returned from our mission," Naruto said, pushing himself up onto his elbows and glaring at her. He snarled at her, "I haven't had time to enjoy some time to myself to relax." "All right. If you're going to complain like a kid." Ryoko waved him away and said, "Go and rest." "I know I need to be ready for what is coming, Grandma," Naruto said, rising and leaving his grandmother, who had grown weary of her making him train. "However, I must also get some rest. Because I might overdo it." He told her, "I won't be resting," and turned to leave. The den of snakes. "Where are the reports?" asked the pale snake of a man a question. A frightened man handed the man a file on the hidden leaf and said, "Here." "Here, sir." Orochimaru smiled as he accepted the file, saying, "Good. Leave me now," he growled. The man bowed and fled in complete terror. He moved to a desk, placed the file on it, and sat down in his chair to examine it. With a pale smile on his face, he opened the file and said to himself, "Let's see." When he sees the pictures arranged in front of him, his eyes enlarge. Uzumaki Ryoko, Uzu's demon. The devil of Konoha is now Kushina Uzumaki's mother. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze's grandmother. Uzumaki Washi, Uzu's mad scientist. Currently, Konoha's mad scientist. One child's mother, Ryoko Uzumaki. Mom of Kushina Uzumaki. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze's great-grandmother. Uzumaki Tsunami. Uzu's goddess. Hokage of Konoha now. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze's great-grandmother. Blinking, Orochimaru dropped the file. "No, no, no, this is not possible," he let out a scream. As his desk crashed into his office door, Orochimaru hissed, "They are messing up my carefully laid out plan. It will not stop me. Even so, I'll kill him and replace him as Cage." He grinned more broadly and hissed to himself, "I will still offer up Suna as my scapegoat." Suna, overlooking the desert dunes that encircle the village he was cursed to be born into, a girl with red hair and teal eyes sat on the edge of a mountain cliff. The crazy sand coon in the girl's head laughed and cried, "Use the sand dunes and bear them. They do not love you. They only wish for your death. They call for it." I sigh and ask the coon inside of me, "No. I am not going to kill anyone, mother. What would I gain from their death and their blood staining my sand?" Whined the small sand coon in the caged, dazzling white mindscape, "Mother wants blood." As she pushed off the ground and watched the sun bid the sand dunes good night as the moon and night took over, a night chill permeating the air, she muttered, "No, mother. I am not going to be doing this." The Konoha. Naruto sighed as he sat by himself in a clearing and watched the moon slowly rise into the sky. "What is calling to me?" he pondered. He closed his eyes slowly and drifted off to sleep in his family's clearing. Jirai planet. "Why isn't grandfather letting me be with my one true love?" Tenio sobbed as she sat in her bedroom. She drinks to herself. "I am going to do as I wish this time around," Azusa says, closing her eyes and clenching her fist as she stands in her doorway and hears her niece sobbing uncontrollably. "Washu and Ryoko be damned," she snarls to herself as she opens her niece's bedroom door. Tenio. "Bring a bag," she tells the girl, "We're going to go find this boy and make you both happy." Tenio looks at her aunt and her head snaps up. "Really?" With tears streaming down her cheeks, she asks. "Yes." With a sinister smile, Azusa turned on her heel and left her niece to gather her belongings before heading to her own room to pack her own belongings. The Konoha. With cold sweat trickling down his body, Naruto leaps up in bed and exclaims, "What the hell is that?" He pushes his hand through his silver blonde hair, pushes the covers off, swings his legs off the bed, and gets up, slowly making his way to the hallway and his open bedroom door. Washu and Ryoko are sitting in the kitchen downstairs, sipping sake. "So, will Naruto be okay during the tests, in your opinion?" Ryoko asks, turning to face her mother. When Naruto enters the kitchen and sees his two grandmothers talking, he says, "Hey." He then moves past them to the refrigerator, opens it, takes out the milk, and spins around to get a glass while his stomach rumbles. He laughs and glances up at his two grandmothers. "So why are you talking about me in the upcoming Chunin exams?" Ryoko asks, while Washu merely rolls her eyes at his antics. He sets down the milk and glass and proceeds to his ramen noodle shelf, where he retrieves multiple packages before heading to the stove and filling his tea kettle with water. As he heats his water, he asks them questions. As the two women gaze up at him, Ryoko sighs and says, "I don't think your team isn't prepared for the Chunin exams because of the way Kakashi is training you. Since the conflict in the Land of Water has finally ended, all of the major villages will participate this year. Additionally, they have a number of genin moments that are nearly Jonin level. However, they cannot advance until they participate in the Chunin exams. In addition, a number of smaller villages will be participating," she remarked with a sigh. Washu just chuckles at her daughter being a worrywart. She is just worried about all that is going to be happening and she will not be able to control it all. She tells her grandson as Ryoko just glares at her. As he pours the hot water into his nods and proceeds to the table with the tray of milk and cup noodles, Naruto simply nods his head and hums, "Well, I was going to ask if it came down to it. Would Grandma let me come in by myself? Even though I know the exam relays solely on teamwork for the first two parts of it." As he began to eat, he remarked, "Well, until the last stage where you might have to fight against your own teammate." Washu looked at the boy seated across from her and said, "I am not sure. But Naruto, what are you doing up at 2 in the morning?" In order to escape training with her and Ryoko, she questions the boy who doesn't wake up for nothing to not even to eat if he is dead tired, as he has been complaining about for the past few days. As the chopsticks protrude from her cup of noodles, Naruto puts it down and stops eating. "I dreamed an odd dream. Similar to a nightmare." He informs the two, "A woman is coming, and she is bringing my doom to me, and she will not take no as an answer." Washu and Ryoko exchange glances before Ryoko says, "What do you mean your doom?" She asks her grandson a question. "She wants me to marry a girl who looks like Tenshi's annoying wife," Naruto says, making a face as he looks at Ryoko. He informs them both, "The only difference is that she has light lavender hair, and she told me I have no say because I am a member of the royal family and must follow orders." When Ryoko and Washu hear this, their eyes darken. Ryoko growls, "Fucking Azusa has the nerve to make a move against us. She thinks she's more powerful than Tsunami and me." A goddess's shadow casts a shadow over Washu, who laughs like a crazy woman. "I'm not sure. All I know is that I am not enjoying this at all, and it woke me up and left me feeling uneasy. For that reason, I didn't like Tenchi or the purple-haired woman who was his wife." Naruto looked down at his hands and said, "I don't want to waste my time on their kids or that woman who thinks she has every right to try and control my life." Tsunami is standing at the kitchen doorway, saying, "Don't worry. She needs to locate us first." As she approaches her grandson and plants a kiss on his forehead, she says, "Then she must get past our sister that is in outer space." Naruto smiles as he looks up at her and says, "Thank you, Grandma." He tells her, "That helps me feel better." With Naruto having the blood of the three goddesses flowing through his veins, it wouldn't do him any good to taint his blood with that family's blood, Tsunami thought. Since they are her own family, she doesn't care because she is one of the three goddesses and has always been a higher being than them. "Clear your mind, slow your breathing, focus on all sounds around me," Naruto told himself as he stood in the middle of the Team 7 training field, his eyes closed, waiting for his clones to emerge from their hiding places. At that moment, 4 clears suddenly materialize from their hedged areas, Naruto's eyes open, and 2 kunai emerge from the sleeves of the hoodie he wore this morning. He uses the kunai in his right hand to cut through 2 of the clones, while his left hand blocks the kunai of another clone, and he uses his mule to kick the 4th clone to death. The 3rd clone on his left side said, "We have you now, boss." The clone then fell to the ground to perform a leg sweep on Naruto, but he jumped up, causing the other two clones to stumble and fall towards the floor. Naruto smirked and threw his kunai in his right hand at the last clone as they all went up in smoke. He exhaled and wiped the perspiration from his brow, and he looked up at the sky and saw that it was around 9:30 a.m. and that no one from his team had yet. "Geez," he says to the wind as he watches the other teams pass. Ino calls out to him, her cheeks slightly flushed, "Naruto." Shikamaru merely smirks, not missing the call. With his big smile still on his face, Naruto turns to face Ino and flies over to the girl, saying, "Hey Ino." He then turns to face Shikamaru and Choji, saying, "Hey Shika, Choji." As he ate some chips, Choji said, "Hey Naruto." Difficult. "Hello, Naruto. Where are your teammates?" Smirking, he asks Shikamaru, but when he notices that Sakura, Kakashi, or Sasuke are not present in the training area with the silver blonde, he frowns. Naruto glances over his shoulder and says, "Yeah, I'm not sure. The team usually arrives by 8 or 9 in the morning. He hasn't shown up, though. Not even the fangirl." He smiles and says to Team 8, "But I am not going to be worrying about it. I'm finally able to observe Sasuke's behavior. I'm relieved that I don't have a crush on him anymore," Ino sighed. When the three boys exchange glances, Choji, Shikamaru, and Naruto all start laughing and say, "Good. You're all jerks," Ino said, glaring at them before bursting into a fit of laughter. Tower of Hokage. The goddess, who is seated in front of all the Jonins in the Hokage's office, has a stunning face with an unsettling frown on it. Her blue eyes scan every Jonin in front of her, focusing on Kakashi for a minute longer than anyone else in her office before stopping on her niece with a gentle smile. This year, the Chunin exams will take place here. Tsunami informs everyone in front of her, "If you nominate your teams, then do it now, but there is going to be a problem for one team. We will have teams from all the major villages, several smaller villages, and a new upstart village from the land of tea. What team will be having an issue?" Asuma asks, stepping forward. She breaks into another smile. "That would be Team 7. For one of the genin has come to me with a request to not be part of his team during the Chunin exams as he stresses that his teammates are not ready for something like this and would end up being killed or worst for Sakura. With us having a few major villages they might even rape Sasuke his bloodline or try to kill him for his eyes." She speaks bluntly to them all. Everyone freezes, and the Jonins all steal glances at Kakashi, who is trying to contain his rage by hiding behind his book. Why is Naruto treating his teammates in this way? As he puts down his book, Kakashi asks himself. With concern in his eyes, Kakashi said, "Mama. Lady Hokage. Before you ask me Kakashi, I have had my spies watching you train your team and to be frank Kakashi. You are a lazy bastard, and your team will be sitting this Chunin exam. Well more Sasuke and Sakura. Naruto will be going on into the exams. But his senseis during this exam will be Ryoko and Jiraiya. During this time Kakashi I want you to get off your ass and train your two students and if Naruto does make it to Chunin ranking, your team will be put in reverses until we are able to find you a new teammate." But Naruto has put in a request that he wishes to leave Team 7 and become a private student of Ryoko, Washu, and Jiraiya. For he feels he is unsafe on his team for your lack of training and your lack of control of your students. With Sakura trying to attack him and Sasuke always being against working as a team and as a loose cannon out on the field and doesn't want to even bother with other things I have seen and read in my reports," said Tsunami with a dark glare at the man standing before her. Kakashi balled his fist and said, "I see." He lets out a mental sigh and leans against the wall, lifting his book back up to conceal his face. He felt so unsafe to come speak with me about his feelings about his teammates and me, he says. I had nothing special to do here for the time being. Ryoko advances a step. I nominate Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze to the Chunin exam as a sole team of one. If he needs backup, he is able to make clones to aid him in the first and second part of the exams. She informs them. A random Jonin in the office asks, "Is that even allowed, Hokage-sama?" Washu takes a step forward while holding a big scroll. "It's here in the rules. If the Hokage allows it, a sole genin is able to take the exam on their own." She clarifies everything. Everyone looks to Lady Hokage for her response. Tsunami glared at everyone and said, "I am going to allow this. For I have seen his training with his family, and I do believe he is ready for the exams. But he is the only one I will allow, before they came up with any amusing concepts." Everybody in the room said, "Yes, Lady Hokage." With Team 10 and Naruto. Naruto frowned and then grinned, saying, "I haven't seen any of the Jonins come to the training grounds so far this morning. But Grandma did say something that there was going to be a meeting with Grandma Hokage with all the Jonin senseis. He informs them." Ino chuckles. "You are the only person in this village to show disrespect to our leader of our village and get away with it, Naruto," she says to him. Naruto protrudes his tongue in their direction. "Yeah, I guess so, but no one has never done anything to stop me, and if they did, I didn't listen," he grinned. Shaking his head, Shikamaru said, "Troublesome blondes." As they all see Sakura entering the clearing, he informs them, "But we should be heading towards our training ground before the Banshee spots us." Naruto waved them away, saying, "All right. Bye you guys, I'll see you later." Sakura sat down and waited for her true and only love to arrive while Team 10 left. Naruto sighs. When he eventually spotted Sasuke making his way to the tree where they wait for Kakashi to appear, he thought to himself, "I guess I should go and join my teammate and wait for the tame to show up." Sakura asks, grinning broadly, "Hi Sasuke. Would you like to have lunch with me after we are doing with training?" When he sees teammate 10 leaving their training ground, Sasuke turns away from her and glares at Naruto, the silver blonde who was approaching them. "No," he said. Sakura just looks at him with hearts in her eyes, and he thinks to himself, "Losers." Before Naruto can reach his teammates, Ryoko appears. "Let's go. Your private train beings today for the Chunin exams. Team 7 is no more. Well to you," as they wait for another to take your place, she says with an enormous grin. Ryoko asks, "So what training ground are we going to us?" Ryoko looked over her shoulder to see Kakashi finally appear in front of his two students and said, "Training ground 11. Next to your friends." With a small leap, Naruto and his grandmother take off together as they float in the air. Sakura glares at their backs and asks, "Hey, where is Naruto going?" Kakashi sighed and said, "Team 7 as of today will be going back into the reserves until we are able to get a new third member." Sasuke is now staring up at Kakashi. He demands of his sensei, who is in front of him, "What do you mean we are going to the reserves?" Naruto had request to be removed from our team. For my lack of training and failing to stop Sakura from attacking a teammate and you from being a lone wolf in a team, said Kakashi with a sigh. Sasuke clenches his fist in a growl. He looks away from Kakashi and hisses, "You best find us a replacement quick, Kakashi. For I will not be sitting idle by while that bastard surpasses me." Kakashi laughs. His response was, "We should find out in a week or two. No later." He tells his two surviving pupils, "But for now it's time to do your warm-ups and we will be training until we take some D-rank missions in the village." At training ground 11, Naruto and Ryoko touch down. Naruto surveys his surroundings and notices that everything they would require for training is there, in order to prepare him for the Chunin exams. He is prepared for the tests. Naruto looks at his grandmother and asks, "So Ba-chana, what are we going to be doing while we are here?" Ryoko grins as she turns to face her grandson. "We are going to be working on fighting while flying. As well we are going to work on the headhunter jutsu. So we will be going after other shinobi in their training grounds with that jutsu," she says with a smirk. When Naruto hears this, his eyes light up. He tells her, "I know who I would like to go after first." Ryoko tilts her head to the right and looks down at her grandson, asking, "Who would that be?" His lips slowly form an evil smirk. "I would like to start with Team Guy. My first two targets are Neji and Guy. It would be a bonus if I am able to trap both Guy and Lee while they are in one of their embraces," he concluded with a wicked chuckle. When Ryoko hears this, she gives an evil smile. She tells him, still grinning, "I approve of your plan. But I am shocked you didn't want to go after Team 7 first." Naruto dismisses her with a wave. "Nah, they would be way too easy to attack and trap. Even Kakashi would be way too easy as well." He exhaled. At this, Ryoko throws her head back and bursts into wild laughter. "We will also be working on your knowledge of poisons as well as building up an immunity to the poisons. So no one is able to take you so easily. As the snake has been seen near the village not so long ago. He was also spotted near the board of the Land of Tea where the new shinobi village is located," she stated to her grandson. As he heard her words, Naruto became serious. He raises his fist to his chin with his right hand. "Well, this is troublesome, for we know he is after Sasuke. For he has been seeking any Uchiha he can get his hands on." They want their eyes to learn the secret of every jutsu this world has to offer. He said as he gazed at Ryoko. He took a deep breath through his nose to see if his anger would overcome him. I already know he has gone after you several times since you have returned to the village. As for Washu-chan and Sasami-chan, not everyone will benefit from this. Because too many people want to commit suicide to escape him when he unleashes his murderous intent around him. Then we have a lot of training to do. For you are just like us Naruto. Sasuke will not be the only one that bastard is going to be going after. So we will be working with Anko as she holds the same summons as the bastard. Her snakes hold the same poison as his. For he has been using their poisons for a while. So we need to make Naruto stronger. For we have too much riding on you. Ryoko said with a scowl on her face as she turned her back on him. Knowing that his grandmother would be a slave driver, Naruto said, then let the fun begin. He started running laps around the training ground. After 2 months, Training Area 9, a genjutsu emerges from the lowering sun behind Guy and Lee as they are yelling each other's names. Before Lee's cry could be heard again, Lee and Guy both scream as they are pulled to their necks by the ground. Neji is also drawn into the earth before Tenten has a chance to blink. Tenten escapes the assailant by leaping into a nearby tree. As Tenten surveys the training area, kunai materializes in her hands, simply witnessing Guy and Lee's head thrashing and wriggling. Neji's bloodline is actively looking for their assailant as he shuts his eyes and opens them again. However, they could hear laughter everywhere, as though ghosts were dancing and giggling at their bad luck. Who's there? Tenten asks, a little alarmed by the situation because she is the only member of Team Guy who hasn't yet been attacked. Although there isn't a genjutsu practice nearby, she has already taken a test for one. Without ever seeing anyone, someone managed to enter and exit covertly. But in an instant, Training Ground 9 is filled with purple smoke. As she rises above the smoke, Tenten tightens her grip on her kunai. The screams from Guy, Lee, and even Neji, however, made her even more agitated. There was nothing she could do about what was happening. To her teammate, she calls out, Neji, do you see anything? No, this smoke is strange. I can't even see my own nose before myself. Neji, please call back. Tenten starts to perspire. Who is capable of creating a smoke ball this powerful? As she opens a big fan, she asks herself this question. She clears the training ground of smoke with a powerful swing of her fan. However, she is alarmed by what she sees. Guy and Lee have hot pink hair and are wearing hot pink corsets and miniskirts. Neji wears a neon blue bodycon dress that stops close to his upper thigh, and he has neon blue hair. What the fuck is going on here? Tenten exclaims, glancing down at her team. She looks around, and more laughter is heard. Guy and Lee are giving each other hugs while complaining about how unyouthful their attire is. Neji is sobbing uncontrollably while curled up in a ball in the corner. A voice she is all too familiar with said, "Hey Tenten." She turns on her heel and looks at the only shinobi in the village who was capable of doing this on his own. Naruto, is this your handiwork? She asks, lowering her gaze to the training ground below and then slowly raising it again to meet his eyes. He gives her a sly smile. With a big smile on his face, he said, yeah. This is my handiwork. It's payback for their nightmare genjutsu. As well as for Neji being a dick all the time. Tenten gives his words a slow nod. She asks him, I see. So I am the only one that is not going to suffer your wrath. Naruto grinned. Tenten, you wound me. How would you think I would hurt you like I did to the others? You have always been so kind to me. He replies with a grin on his face. As he leaps from the tree branch and disappears into the sky, Neji catches a glimpse of Naruto leaving the training ground and he tells her, but I must leave before they come to their senses. Neji yells, Naruto, I'm going to kill you, as he leaps to his feet to pursue the crazy blonde. Additionally, this causes Guy and Lee to break out of their sobbing fit and pursue their teammate as they pursue their assailant. Naruto got up a bit earlier than usual. Nothing like his typical 4 a.m. wake-up time to start his regular train. No, he had to be at the academy at 9 a.m. to start the exam, so he got up at 7 a.m. Since he had separated from both Kakashi and Team 7, time had passed quickly. Because the man was unfit to serve as a genin team sensei at all. He isn't in the right frame of mind, let alone a shinobi. Something he had discussed with both his great-grandmother and his grandmothers. No jutsu flashback. When Naruto notices his 3 grandmothers enjoying tea at the table, he enters the kitchen. Ryoko grinned as she glanced up at him. She says, "Hey brat." Naruto smiled and said, "Hey grandma." It gradually turns into a frown. Because he had only been a member of Team 7 for one day. Tsunami observes his change in attitude and scowls. She gets up from her chair and asks him, "What's wrong, sweetie?" Moving slowly in his direction, she touched his shoulder with her hands. She tilts her head slightly to look him in the eye. She leads him to a chair at the kitchen table and asks, "Tell me what is weighing heavy on your mind," putting him in between Ryoko and Washu. Because they had looked at him with concern as well. Once seated, he glances up at the three of them in the kitchen. He informs everyone, the members of Team 7 need some serious physiological help. Washu frowns and presses her lips together. She asks him, "What has drawn you to this conclusion?" A deep sigh escapes his lips. He tells them, closing his eyes and lowering his head to the table, "It is because of how Kakashi is never there to train, not even lift a finger to even bother to teach us. Only when it came to him being threatened by Grandma Ryoko did he get off his ass. As well he spends hours before the memorial stone, staring at three names. His fingers are always tracing them. As I had noticed, those three names have been weathered more than the others. There are other days he will trace a fourth one. All he ever does when it comes to any training he wishes to do or even bother with is teamwork. To be honest, his mental state isn't any better than Sasuke or Sakura. He tells them as he stands on the edge and looking them in the eyes. His scowl only grew more intense. Ryoko now puts a finger to her lips as she considers the events that have transpired since she first met Kakashi. How she was even more irritated and disappointed by the man. The two other women were staring at her as Naruto's head hit the table once more. He hasn't been in the right mental space since we came to this village. It appears everyone has overlooked his mental state for the goals of all the missions he had been forced to take. Never allowed to heal, for I had looked over his file before I had taken over Naru-chan's training. He had swung it sideways so he could gaze at her in awe. With a frown on her lovely face and concern in her pinkest eyes, Tsunami said, "What did you find in his file?" For I hadn't been able to review it so far, as I have been going through all the shinobi from the oldest and making my way down. Naruto looked at the others and said, "I know Kakashi was my father's student. I also know that my father had taken over caring for Kakashi as his father killed himself." Ryoko asks, "How do you know all of this?" She has forgotten that her grandson's gut mindscape is home to a living chakra beast. Naruto gives her a series of slow blinks. He tells her, "Uma, fuzzy bunny fox in my gut." Kurama growls, irritated with the boy, "Hey brat, I am not a kami-saking bunny." Yeah. Sorry Fuzzy," Naruto laughed to himself in response. The three women, who were well aware that the silver, blonde boy was talking to the fox, watch him nod off for a while. He gives the three a sheepish smile while blinking multiple times. He continued to smile sheepishly and said, "Okay. Sorry, he was very mad at me for calling him a bunny fox." As she closely observes her grandson, Washu asks, "So are you going to tell us about Sasuke and Sakura?" "Yeah, I'll begin with Sasuke. He has an ego that is larger than Hokage Mountain. As well he believes that he is able to work on his own and that anyone else within the team is just cannon favor. For him to use them as stepping stones for him to reach his own personal goals." "What goals do you ask?" "Well, his personal goal of killing his brother and rebuilding his clan. With his brother out of the way, no one will be able to stop him from becoming the head of the Uchiha clan and he would feel safe to do as he wishes. For all his faults are to be blamed on his brother. For it was his fault for the shit hand he had been given." Naruto looked at them all. Tsunami and Washu scowl at one another. Because a shinobi shouldn't think like this. As Ryoko grows weary of the pampered little brat, she growls, "Well, he needs to get the fuck over himself." Washu watched the boy sitting next to her with her arms folded across her chest and said, "Also what's to say he wouldn't find someone else for all his shortcomings?" Naruto looks her in the eye. "Nothing. Sasuke believes the world will bend to him. If he doesn't get his way, he will kill them. I already know I am on that list of people who he wishes to murder. To use as his stepping stone to be able to kill Itachi." He stated this when his head touched the table again. With another frown on her face, Tsunami said, "I will have Kakashi and Sasuke to have an evaluation on their mental states." Now with Sakura, she is living in a fantasy world believing Sasuke will save her if she is in danger. As well, she has dual personalities. I have seen it several times, as if another person has taken over her body and her becoming a whole new person. Something I know has gone unnoticed by many people. Well, Ino and Shikamaru, and I also believe Shino has seen it happen. As well, she has anger issues to the point she believes that violence will solve all her problems without taking responsibilities for her shitty actions. She is book smart. She isn't street smart. I do believe on her first higher rank mission she will go on in the future with Sasuke and Kakashi with their unknown new member. She will not fare well and only 3 things await her. Sadly, I do believe death would be the best outcome for her," said Naruto as he breathes into the table as he bangs his forehead. The 3 women exchange glances. As her computer materialized in front of her, Washu said, "Well, do not worry about this. It shall be handled." She starts typing. Retrieving 3 files about 3 shinobi. Putting all missions on medical leave for them. Won't be permitted to rejoin active duty until all of their reviews have been approved by Washu. Flashback ends without jutsu. He looks at his clock and shakes his head at the memory. In order to advance in his shinobi career, it was now time for him to leave the house and go to the academy. He grabs his duster, drapes it over his shoulders, and heads for the front door, to come back after the tests are finished. Well, the initial 2 exam phases. He had researched previous exams in the Hidden Leaf. It has been years since they changed. He therefore had the impression that he would be going home in roughly a week, ensuring that he had food and camping supplies in his scrolls. He departed and made his way to the village. A frown gradually appears on his lips as he continues to walk down the dirt road toward the academy after a few minutes. He moaned at what he saw, something that simply made him want to kill the 2 people who were waiting for him. A quick, rapid death, to put an end to any drama they might bring to the village in the future. Sakura and Sasuke are in front of him. Naruto stops in front of the 2 idiots at the gates and asks, "What are you doing here?" The silver blonde in front of him gets a glare from Sasuke. As the boy glares at him with coal-colored eyes full of hatred, he growls, "We are here to take part in the Chunin exams." Sakura, who appeared to be a lovesick toad waiting for a big fly to land in her open mouth, said, what Sasuke-kun said. "We are here to take part and move up in ranking." Naruto gives them a snort. He decided it was pointless to waste his time on them now and told them, "How are you going to take part? There are only 2 of you. Last I heard, there still isn't a 3rd member of Team 7. Only leaving you 2 fools." Because he needed to take an exam. The last thing on his mind was Team 7. Since he was no longer a member of their team, he refused to spend any more time with them. He never wanted to participate and train to become a true shinobi because they had already wasted months of his time with their pointless fighting. He passes them. 2 Jonins are waiting for the test to begin as they wake up to the academy's closed gates. Sasuke growls as his hands move through hand signals to launch his fireball attack at his former teammate's back. "You will not ignore me. You will bow to my wishes and know your place. As you are just a waste of space, I need to take part in the Chunin exams. For you are just as worthless as Sakura." As Naruto glances over his shoulder at the attack that is flying toward his turnback, flames shoot out of his mouth. Of a person who isn't even worthy of being considered a shinobi. Of a person who belongs in the mental health unit, where the trauma he had experienced as a child would finally provide him with the assistance he needs. Around the silver blonde, a wall of green flames rises from the earth. Naruto spins on his heel, his eyes hardening. He is approaching his former teammate. "You shouldn't even be a shinobi. Where you belong is in a mental ward or in prison. As you have finally done it. You have attacked a shinobi of this village. As you are not getting your way. You are just a spoiled child. A child that needs his ass beaten. For these actions only proves me right. That you are not mental stable to even think about living this lifestyle. You should just be a civilian. A civilian worrying about rebuilding the stain of a clan that had planned to overthrow the village. A clan that didn't care if they killed any civilians or shinobi of this village to get what they wanted. What they have proven to be unworthy of. For the only thing is your father and his elders and other fools willing to follow him. To take over our village and homes. Making all that live in this village into their slaves." He screams. Gradually, his voice came up, causing everyone in their immediate vicinity to pause and listen with horrified expressions. Sasuke growls, his coal eyes taking on a mad expression. "My father should have had his way. He should have taken over this fucking village full of worthless bastard. For all of this village is not worth standing before the Uchiha clan. They are just worthy of being our stepping stones. To die when we order them to." The three people standing in front of the locked gates are met with gasps and murmurs from both civilians and shinobi, as well as from others who want to participate in the Chunin exams. The two Jonins use their headsets to signal Anbu or anybody else to come and remove the two remaining members of Team 7. They were confronted by an enraged Ibiki. He was standing in the courtyard. All the two had just told him. His veins throbbed with anger. He recalled that he had heard rumors. The Uchiha realized his father's path was correct after hearing this again. Made him want to murder the last Uchiha in his current position. Ibiki growls, "Genin Uchiha." Standing in front of Sasuke, the man appeared to be death himself. Sasuke looks up at the man in front of him and hisses, "What the fuck do you wanted, you lowly piece of shit?" Before anyone realized what had just transpired, Sasuke is propelled into the stone wall adjacent to the academy's iron gates. He had blood running down his mouth. Sakura recoils from the Jonin's treatment of her Sasuke-kun. A snake encircled the Pinket's right leg and began biting into her skin before she had a chance to think or blink, causing the girl to scream again before she faints. Sasuke tried to use the same fireball attack he used on her former teammate on the man, but another snake appeared in front of him, biting into his own flesh. Ibiki gives Naruto a downward glance. Naruto gives him another look. He never takes his eyes off the man. What I had just told Sasuke is true. For I was there that night. They had me bound to a chair in their shrine. Well, the sub-basement, where they had been making their plans to overthrow the Hokage and take over our home. I also have the scrolls. If you wish, I can send a shadow clone to bring them to you," he stated to the man in front of him. As he observes a shadow clone come to life beside the boy without hand seals, Ibiki nods his head and grunts. "Once the first part of the exams are over, my clone will take you to the old Uchiha district, to the shrine, and show you where they had me bound, where they had planned to rip out a part of me, ending my life to use it once more against the village. For what I had found within their documents, it was a Uchiha that had attacked the village the night I was born. The night I had lost everything, only being a few hours old," said Naruto as a gloomy aura surrounded with his teeth bared. The Arua assumes the shape of a nine-tailed fox, which is now restrained by three Anbu and a smirking Anko. Ibiki and Anko watched from the sidelines as he said, "I shall speak with your clone about the subject some more. Once we are done with this first part, one would like to speak to you before the second part takes place," notifying the woman that she would have to wait a moment to start the second section, because she had a gut feeling that the silver blonde would make it to the second section. Hell, if she bet right now, he might even become a Chunin if he made it to the exam finals. When she goes to the Jonin lounge to wait for her turn to lead the brats to her little playground, she merely smirks to herself, picturing how much she is going to put on the boy. Ibiki looks at the two Jonin. Since he is no longer a member of Team 7, let the boy in. It will just be him. In my opinion, today marks the end of Team 7 until the next group of Genin graduates from the academy. Unfortunately, neither the snake nor his little pet had noticed what had happened. They had already entered the academy to wait for their prize, a prize that would never enter the building, a prize that will be held within the deepest pits of the village, where only Washu can enter, and where those who wish to speak to the two would need the woman to enter. They had a terrible feeling that something evil was approaching the peaceful village, but the darkness that looms over it is unaware that two goddesses lurk there as well, just waiting for the right moment to strike and remove those who pose a threat to the safety of those they have vowed to protect. There is only one person who would do this, though, because he still cared for the village that made his life miserable, that had already taken so much from him, and he still stands strong to protect the idiots who had never seen him as a human. It is time to take them to my special holding cells. Washu's bright green eyes shifted to Ibiki as he appeared in front of the Anbu and Anko. "Once you are done with everything," he said. With a big smile on her face, she said, "Have Lady Hokage call me, and I'll take you to your new playthings." Ibiki grunts once more, nods his head, and turns on his heels to return to the building. He had to prepare for the first stage, which was to vent his rage on those who thought they belonged in the Chunin ranks. Having said that, those who are scheduled to take the test must line up in front of the Jonin guards and present their shinobi ids and supporting documentation. It does appear that the boy has become one with the nine tails, he muses to himself as a dark-skinned, blonde man stands leaning against a building in the shadows, observing what has just transpired. For my brother to appear in the boy's aura, nothing and no one will stand in their way now that he has won their favor. The dark voice inside the man's head said, "Never even us." As he pushed off the wall and emerged from the shadows, he said to the beast, "Do believe you were right. I pity the fools who even think about trying." His last words were sealed deep within him, and he saw a man wearing all white, with a cloud shinobi headband on his forehead. It was time for him to join the other Jonins in keeping watch over their students, and perhaps even in some of the betting pools, because the message he would be sending his brother tonight would be having the man join him to watch the finals in person. Washu emerges from Anbu HQ's holding cells, her pink eyes staring at the two Anbu holding the two struggling genin. With the security risks that might befall within the village, with all the forged shinobi within the village walls, Hokage-sama believes they will be safer to be held within one of my dimension cells. She tells the two Anbu, causing them to turn to face her and nod slowly as though they are aware that she is there. Additionally, they have orders from their Hokage, who knows that no matter how secure their holding cells are, someone could break in. The woman in front of them is correct. As Hound bows to the woman in front of him, Boar responds, "Yes, Lady Washu." Washu's bottom lip protrudes and starts to wobble as she pouts up Boar. With her big puppy eyes, she asks the poor man, "Why didn't you call me Little Washu?" The man in front of her is overcome with immense guilt. In front of her, he drops to his knees. Boar cries to the bubblegum Pinkett in front of him, "I am sorry Little Washu. Please forgive me." She gives him a gentle smile. She pats him on the head and says, "It is all right Boar-san. I forgive you." He glances up at her again. He gives her a smile from behind his mask. He holds on to the gagged banshee and tells her, "Thank you Little Washu." Hound is sweating from the two of them's actions. Hound, who wants to go back to his job of ignoring the beginning of the genin exams, says, "Little Washu, please lead us to your private holding cells." Washu waves her hand and says, "Yes, yes." Her computer appears in front of her as she turns on her heels. As soon as she starts typing, a black door appears in front of her. As her computer disappears and she makes her way to the door, she says, "All right gentlemen. Follow me." She put her hand on the knob and turned it. The Jonin lounge. Ryoko is seated against the distant wall on a black couch. She keeps an eye on every Jonin sensei in the lounge with her golden eyes. Observing the Jonins from Iowa shaking every time she looks at them. She simply gives them a big smile, which makes them even more alarmed. A man with a Kumo headband and dark tan skin enters the Jonin lounge wearing all white. He focused his attention on the demon of Kohona. He approaches the woman without hesitation. They took a seat on the black couch, making room for someone to join them. Ryoko smiles and says, "Hello B." Her response is, "Hello my demoness goddess." B greets her. Everyone turns to look at the two. As the two converse, the room falls silent. Ryoko raises a cyan eyebrow at him and asks, "So you have a team in this year's Chunin exams?" B gives her a smile and responds, "Yes, I do." With a smile, he asks her, "So, Ryoko, what do you say? Will you marry me?" Ryoko gives him a thoughtful glance while cocking her head to the right. She shifts her right hand under her chin while continuing to think, saying, "I don't know Killer B. I will not leave my family for you." With hope in his voice, Killer B tells her, "Oh my demoness. Please make me a happy man." Ryoko asks him, "Would it allow you to move her?" As his golden eyes move in his direction, he opens and shuts his mouth. With a hopeful smile, he tells her, "I am not sure. But, he will be here for the final part of the exams. I would be able to ask him in person then." Ryoko smiles and says, "Then I shall give you my answer then." The Chunin exams, initial exam. Naruto enters the waiting area and takes a corner. His gaze swept the room, taking in every team in the waiting area. Team 8, 9, and 10 caught his attention. Since the two who would have made a lot of noise with their enormous egos were not with him, none of them even paid attention to him. At the right of the three teams, who are all standing together and observing them, he grins. Perhaps in an attempt to locate himself or Team 7. He sees a teenage girl with raven hair observing them nearby, and a frown stains his face. Something inside of him kept screaming that the girl wasn't right because of something about her that raised red flags. He is pulled away from the frightening girl by an explosion coming from the front of the room. As soon as he could look back and see where she was. Now that she is gone, the window is open, and that is the only change. Ibiki screams, "All right fuckers. Look down here and listen well." And the room falls silent. "Good. Now you will see a box down here. Match yourselves down those stairs and draw lots of here you will be seated. I want you little shits to get into 2 single-file lines. Ibiki instructs them. They formed the 2 single-file lines out of fear of the man in front of them. They all took their turns and moved past the doorway to the side. They all found their seats. When Naruto sits down and notices Ino seated beside him, he snorts. He says, "Hello Ino-chan." Her cheeks blush softly. She returns the greeting, saying, "Hi Naruto-kun." Shyly gives him a smile. Naruto-kuna, Ino said, a little uncertain whether or not to ask him. Continuing to smile, I looked at her. He asks her, "What's wrong, Ino-chan?" With a slightly perplexed expression, Ino asks, "Where are Sakura and Sasuke?" I snort. I told her the truth, they are in jail at the moment. Her mouth falls open in disbelief. She tries to ask, "Wow. So With a gentler smile, I tell her, I am able to take the exam on my own. I look down at Ibiki and tell her, I am no longer part of Team 7 and at this moment Team 7 is no more. Recovering from the shock of what Naruto had just revealed to her, Ino merely gives him a smile. She tells him, her cheeks lightly dusting a light pink, "Well, if you need any help in the second part of the exam, you're more than welcome to join us." Shikamaru tells the boy in front of him, "Troublesome." She is right Naruto. If you need any help, we will help you. Choji simply nods his head in agreement. Naruto gives his friends a dazzling smile. He hears Ibiki shouting and tells them, "Thank you. If I do, I shall find you all." He spins on his heel and heads for the rear of the forming line, telling them, "I guess it's time to start." I'm not particularly eager to find out what Ibiki has in store for them. Ibiki continued to watch Naruto. He snorted and said to himself, "So, he is the brat that is taking the exam alone." He observes the other hopefuls and slackers. Reaching the end at last, a ball with a number on it is taken out of the box by Naruto. He smirks as he glances up at Ibiki and considers it. With a sinister smile on his face, he says, "Oh lucky 113. The Chunin will be working with the special Jonin." Ibiki snarls at the boy in front of him, saying, "Get in there punk." Before the man could even consider using a jutsu on his sly mouth, Naruto rushed into the room and mockingly saluted him, saying, "Yes, sir." As he dashed into the spacious classroom, he ascends the stairs to the location he knew would be 113 and settles his ass on the indisputable chair. As 2 people settle into chairs 112 and 114, he complains to himself, "Geez, he really made sure these chairs are torture." Naruto looks to his right and sees Ino sitting next to him, Shika sitting just below him, and Ino and Choji sitting just 2 rows away. Ino's eyes are teal blue and smile. He says to Ino, "Well, this is going to be fun." Ino gave him a smile. She looks down at her teams and chirps, "Yup." Choji simply gives her a thumbs up, while Shika gives her a sluggish smile. He missed Ino being silently teased by her 2 male teams as he turned to his left. He locks eyes with sea green eyes to his left. He raises an eyebrow at the love tattoo on her forehead. He says, "Hello," to the unfamiliar Suna girl standing beside him. She narrows her eyes as she looks at the boy beside her. She turns her head away from him and rasps, "Mother doesn't like you." Raising a second eyebrow, her eyes enlarge as Naruto says, "Mother huh? Well tell mother her big brother says to shut up and stop having a fit." However, the room was silenced before she could say anything. Ibiki snarls at all of the Chunin hopefuls, saying, "All right maggots. Shut the fuck up and listen well." Everyone abruptly stopped talking as their heads snapped to the front. Ibiki has a sinister grin on his face. He clasped his hands behind his back and said, "Good, you little bastards can listen. That will take you far in this world." His icy black eyes were fixed on the Chunins he had placed next to each row. They all nod their heads in the direction of the man, being respectful of the man. Ibiki says, "In the first part of these exams, I will test you." While displaying a white piece of paper with text on it, he gave them a moment to look down before saying, "Upon your desks are pencils and exam sheets." As he watches their faces shift from horror to anger, he says, "I only have a few simple rules for every one of you to follow. If you do not follow my rules and get caught, you will be kicked out of the entire exam." Prior to everyone going crazy, Ibiki raises his right hand, preventing them from speaking. It also didn't lessen the waves of murderous intent that swept over them. There are a few shivers of fear, a few unfortunate people faint, and their teams are all dismissed early, even before receiving the exam guidelines. Ibiki told them, his dark smirk now replaced by a devilish grin, Well, some of the canon fathers took themselves out. Becoming a chunin and later in life becoming a jonin isn't for the wear of heart. As you will be placing your life on the line each and every time you step out of your respected village. Now back to the rules. Ibiki snarls, as his obnoxious younger sister sits next to his kid and observes that Shikaku is making the poor girl angry. Kurama says, "Okay, I'm getting bored." "I understand." Hearing Ibiki try to frighten the living daylights out of everyone in here is monotonous. However, if anyone knows him well, that he truly is a giant teddy bear. Unless Grandma Hokage is to blame. In his mind, Naruto spoke to his best friend. Kurama complained, "I am getting a headache. My bratty little sister wants to visit me." "Huh, are you able to do that?" Naruto asked him a question. His big crimson eyes were rolling. Kurama responded, "Yes, it is," as he made room in Naruto's mind for his younger sister to visit him. Ibiki said, "All right brats. You have 1 hour to finish your exam." As the sound of flipping papers filled the room, Naruto is startled out of his reverie as he starts working. I smirked at how simple it was. Because Washu had given him more difficult exams than he and those around him had received. "I got this," Naruto thought to himself as Kurama blocked his kid from the shit show that was about to go down. A little anxious about her test, Ino surveys her surroundings. She notices Hinata, who scored second in the class. She goes over the hand signals for her clan jutsu with a small smile, briefly assuming control of the Hyuga heiress's thoughts. Naruto tries not to chuckle at who Ino had chosen to get her answers from. Shikamaru could have gotten from the lazy genin because he was only 1 seat ahead of Hinata. Ino quickly sits up and starts working on her exam after returning to her body. She looks at Naruto, who has his exam turned over and is writing and drawing on the back, and she feels relieved as she finishes. She gives him a curious look. She puts a finger to his lips and winks at him, and he smiles, causing the girl to blush even more. "All right maggots, put your pencils down. For it is time for the 10th and final question." Ibiki lets out a growl, frightening half of them. All of the Chunin hopefuls were looking at the demon in front of them when they heard people setting down their pencils and flipping papers. Now the 10th question depends upon you. For if you get it wrong you lose the right to become a Chunin. This also means your teammates. So think long and hard on this. For if you get it wrong well you will be genins for the rest of your lives or maybe be kicked out of the program. Ibiki continues with a dark chuckle, watching the terror in the eyes of the little children before him playing shinobi. The murderous intent rolling off the man below them made Ino shudder. Observing her fear, he could feel the fear rolling off the girl beside him. He smiles at her while he looks in her direction and puts his hand over Ino's shaking hand. He took her hand in his own gently. Gazing at her hand, she slowly lifts her head to look at the arm and then up at the person's face, her eyes widening in shock, looking him in the eye. She notices that he is grinning at her. Naruto whispers to her, "Don't worry. It will be okay. He is just playing some mind games." She smiles back at him and releases a breath she didn't realize she had been holding, with a, "oh," expression on her face. As he watches the teams fall like flies, Ibiki smiles. Good, he thought to himself, still smiling like a demon, all the weak-willed ones will not make it to Anko's stage of the exam. Ibiki snarled at them, "All right maggots those of you still hurry. You've passed." "What?" demanded the teams that were still in the classroom. Ibiki yells at them, "Shut up and begrateful. As I can still fail you here and now," causing them to be afraid of Kami. Ibiki smirks and calls to the boy, "Now Naruto. I need to speak with you." I'm hoping they're afraid of why he's picking one of the genin to be with them. He rose from his seat. He winks at Ino, who is staring at him anxiously. Huffing at the boy's antics, he gets up, pushes his chair in, and then goes down the stairs to the man with the scare. Anko observes Ibiki as he singles out one of the Chunin hopefuls while perched on a tree branch outside. However, they had to talk about it. She continues to smile like a man-woman as she receives Ibiki's signal to enter, telling herself, "Brad knows too much about this village that puts everyone living here to shame." Beside Naruto, a shadow clone emerges. The man modifies his head, which is the signal that lets the woman know when to enter, and Naruto tells Ibiki, "Like I promised you. Here is the shadow clone." Anko was in front of Ibiki, Naruto, and his shadow clone. Anko smiled mischievously and said, "It looks like I have quite a few to cut. But don't worry, I'll take care of it during the second phase of the exam." Naruto said to the terrified man in front of him, "This is my shadow clone, Ibiki-san. He will tell you everything you need to know." He continued. Ibiki gave a nod and turned to leave, with Naruto's clone trailing behind. When Anko yelled, "All right maggots. Follow me to the next exam," he scared all of the Chunin hopefuls. Anko then departed through the broken window. Others were left wondering, what the fuck just happened? Until they noticed the blonde boy talking to the devil who had to put up with it. They fled after the crazy, blonde woman. The Forest of Death, also known as Training Ground 44. The Chunin aspirant arrived at Training Ground 44. Wide-eyed, they gazed at the training ground's massive fences. A young genin from the land of grass asks, why are there fences surrounding the training ground? Anko smiles. It's to keep pesky little genin out and the big bad creatures that live herein. She explains to the terrified young girl. She turned her gaze away from the redhead and thought to herself, little girls like her will not make it far in this shinobi world. Naruto squinted at the girl whose red hair resembled his mother's. Kurama, he pondered. Kurama asks his kit, what is it kit? Naruto asks his fluffy bunny fox, was the Uzumaki clan the only ones with crimson hair like that girl's? Kurama is now narrowing his eyes and looking up at this. He responds to the boy, yes, kit. The Uzumakis are the only ones with that hair color kit. With a hint of hope in his voice, Naruto said to Kurama, well shit, we have a living Uzumaki within the village. We need to find her while within the Forest of Death. Ino observes the range of emotions on Naruto's face, only to ponder what's going through his mind when it comes to hope. Anko tells the genin, okay, listen up. One must sign this release form before you are able to line up at your respected gate. A random genin asks, why? Because this keeps my ass from getting sued from your village if you die or if your shinobi career is ended during this phase of the exam. Anko smirks devilishly. As each genin takes a form to sign their lives away, only for a higher ranking, sweat marks appear over their heads at the crazy woman's antics. They're all questioning whether it's worth taking the chance for a ranking. Naruto, holding the scroll, realizes he is close to the crimson-haired girl's gate. At this, a tiny smile crosses his lips. He will soon discover whether or not she is actually family. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Anko shouts, go, over the PA system. Naruto made a snap decision as the gates slammed open, creating a shadow clone to locate Team 10 and inform them that he would locate them as soon as he had some answers regarding a girl he had seen. The clone then set out to locate them. Running in the direction of Gate 21, Naruto was aware that he had to discover the destination of that team from the Land of Grass. The genin team from the Land of Grass is located close to Gate 21. A boy with ash blonde hair growls, Karen, you are a dead weight on our team. If we didn't need you, we would just kill you here and now. It's true what Taka said is true. We don't care what our village leader says that you're important to the village. You're just a whore we bite to heal ourselves with, said a child with hair that was pink. Karen trembled a little and said, Mao, you know. Taka and you will get in trouble if anything happens to me. I don't give a damn, Karen. We are going to kill you here after we pass this part of the exam, said the man who was now known as Mao. From behind Taka, there's a grunt. As two enormous black bears emerge behind Taka and Mao, Karen screams in terror and collapses back onto her butt. Biara, yelling at the two unworthy boys. When he heard a scream, Naruto forced more chakra into his legs because he knew he had to move more quickly to the source of the screams. As she watches her two teammates attempt to repel the two enormous black bears in front of them, Karen crawls back on her hands and feet, slamming her back against a huge tree. Mao was unlucky, though, as a huge right paw struck his left shoulder, shattering it and severing his arm with its razor-sharp claws. Mao lets out screams and cries as the bear's mouth descends and bites off the boy's head. As the bear crewed on its meal, the boy's body went limp and fell to the ground. It scowled its head, then picked up the arm and crewed on it. When Taka heard his late teammate's spine-tingling screams, he made the fatal mistake of taking his eyes off his bear. The boy's life was immediately ended when the black bear took this opportunity to cut him open. When Naruto finally arrived, he saw two enormous black bears consuming two grass genin, and Karen shuddering in terror against a huge tree. However, Naruto didn't have to attack because the bear's meal was sufficient. The two boys were slightly bigger than Choji. After eating, Karen and Naruto went back into the forest by themselves. Naruto asks the sobbing girl, "Are you okay?" Karen looks up at the spot where she heard the voice. "No, not really. I just watched my asshole teammates be killed and eaten," she tells him uncertainly. Naruto rubbed his right hand behind his head and uttered a sheepish, "Oh. I'm sorry." Naruto looked around them and realized she had failed the test and needed assistance getting to the tower in the middle of the forest. Naruto asks her, would you like to travel with me to the tower?" Karen looks up at him, wiping the tears from her face. She stopped trembling gradually. She slowly and tremblingly gets to her feet and says, Yeah, I would like that." Naruto introduces himself, saying, "I'm Naruto Uzumaki. It's nice to meet you." Karen introduces herself, saying, "Uzumaki. I'm Karen Uzumaki. My mom said the last Uzumaki in Konoha died about 15 to 16 years ago." She informs him. In response, Naruto says, "I know. I'm her son." Feeling a little depressed but sheepish, Karen said, "Oh. I'm sorry." She tells him, "Thank you for helping me, Naruto-san." With a brilliant, dazzling smile that rendered Karen blind, Naruto tells her, "Don't worry about. I'm only glad to find some family." Alongside Team 10, as he backflips after an attack, Shikamaru complained, "Troublesome." Using an earth jutsu against the attacking Genin team, Ino growled, "Shut up and return their attack." Choji pulled out 2 of the Genin at once as his hands grew and clapped together. It turned into mud as Shikamaru combined Ino's earth jutsu with a water jutsu, keeping the rest of the Genin trapped in the swamp they made. As Shikamaru and Choji searched through the Genin's belongings for the necessary scrolls, the Naruto clone emerged into the clearing and said, "Hey guys, boss will be here soon." Looking back at her 2 teammates, Ino said, "Okay." With Karen and Naruto, Naruto said to Karen, "I hate to ask you. Do you have your group's scroll?" For a brief moment, Karen stood there blinking as she processed the blonde's question. She asks him, I do." "Why do you ask?" As if it were that easy, Naruto told her, "So, I know if I have to hunt for a scroll I need to enter the tower." Karen pulled out the Heaven Scroll and said, "Oh. I have the Heaven Scroll." She was the one who had to turn in the forms because her 2 teammates had been too lazy to do so. With a million-watt smile, Naruto informed her, "Yes, I have the Earth Scroll. Now we just need to meet up with my friend and make our way to the tower. For I'm sure they have already found their scroll they need." The boy smiles, and Karen closes her eyes. "Okay. Grandma Ryoko, Lil Washu, Grandma Tsunami will be happy to know another family member has survived." Naruto went on. Looking at the boy in front of her, Karen asks, Wait, you're telling me the 3 goddesses of Uzu are still alive?" Naruto looks at her and blinks. He responds to her as though it were unimportant, saying, "Yeah. They are my grandmothers. Well, 2 of my great-grandmothers. But grandmothers nonetheless. Tsunami is the Hokage of this village as we speak." Karen told Naruto, her voice laced with annoyance, "Naruto, this is important. Once it gets out that the goddesses of Uzu are alive, whatever remaining Uzumakis that are alive will come to Konoha to join to serve under the clan leaders." Naruto said, "Oh," without giving it much thought. He was aware that his grandmother had played a significant role in the past. However, they are his family and his world. With a sorrowful tone, Karen said to him, "Come on. Let's find your friends." She couldn't think of any friends when she thought about her hometown. Naruto grinned broadly and said, "All right." Naruto gave her one of his radiant smiles and said, "Come on Karen, we need to find my friends," merely observing Naruto. His cheerful disposition makes her blush a little. She said, "Okay," and trailed after him. Alongside Team 10, Ino sighed. They hunkered down in a small cave where his shadow clone had gone up in smoke to inform his boss where they would be waiting for them. "Where is here?" she asks. As he watched her worry about their blonde friend, Shikamaru said, "Troublesome. He will be here soon, Ino." Naruto appeared in front of them and said, "I'm right here." They noticed a girl with red hair and spectacles standing behind him. Choji asks, "Who's your friend Naruto?" In between mouthfuls, Naruto told them, beaming broadly, because he was proud of himself, "Well, she is an Uzumaki. Maybe a cousin, not sure. I'm going to have Grandma Washu find out once we make it to the tower." Choji grinned and added, "I'm glad you found a clansman." Shikamaru said, feeling uneasy about spending too much time in this forest. "All right. Let's get moving to the tower." They were unaware that they had escaped a trap set for Team 7. a trap designed to keep Sakura and Sasuke away from Naruto, from Pito the snake. Orochimaru's sickly yellow eyes glow in the darkness of the treetops as he hisses, "Where is my prize?" The blonde of the group had been seen. "Where is Sasuke-kun?" Tower. Team 10 went into the same room as Naruto and Karen. Both of them toss the scrolls. Their sensei appears in 2 clouds of smoke. Jiraiya appeared in front of Naruto. He asks, "Hey brat, who's your friend?" as he notices Karen standing behind Naruto. "An Uzumaki," is Naruto's straightforward response. When Jiraiya heard this, her eyes widened in surprise. As Washu's 2 puppets materialized on his shoulders, he remarked, "Well, I'll have to get a hold of Washu. She knows. She has been watching the exam and will meet you inside," the puppet said. Puppet 2 gave a head nod. As he approaches the door leading into the tower, Naruto says with a corny smile, "Well, you heard the puppets. Let's go find Grandma Washu." Asuma merely gives his team a smile. As he turned to follow the blonde and learn about the newest Uzumaki in the hidden leaf, he told them, "You did well." Alongside Washu, while waiting for Naruto to arrive with the mystery girl he had been traveling with, Washu sat just outside the medical bay. Naruto turns the corner, the others trailing behind, and calls out, "Washu Grandma." Washu giggled as she watched him blush when she called him, "Chan. My little Naruto-chan." Naruto smiles and says, "Ba-chan, I have someone here to meet you." Washu is now glancing over his shoulder at the redhead who was standing behind him. She asks him, "Who's the girl behind you, Naru-chan?" Karen sidesteps Naruto. She gives Washu a tense smile and says, "I am Karen Uzumaki." When Washu learns the girl is an Uzumaki, his eyes enlarge. She looks at the girl and asks, "Another Uzumaki?" She smiled as a door opened behind her and said, "Come with me to my private lab so I can see what we can learn about you." Karen followed Washu into the unfamiliar lab as she opened the door and floated into her own lab, saying, "Come, come." Naruto turned to face the others. He said, "I'm starving. Let's get something to eat." Choji, who had just run out of chips, enthusiastically nodded in agreement. They make their way to the cafeteria. Washu's individual laboratory. Karen surveys the unfamiliar laboratory she entered. She asks Washu, a little perplexed, "Where are we?" Washu smiles and says, "This is my personal lab. A place only I and 4 others can enter without my aid." Sasuke screams, "Hey, let me out of here," as he strikes his cage's bars. Sakura yells, "Yes, let Sasuke-kun and me out," as she tries to get past the bars of her cage. With a shit-eating smile, Washu told them, "Shut up you two. You're in trouble for attacking a shinobi of this village and will be punished soon. You are here because no one will be able to kidnap or set you free." Sakura tries shaking her bars and yells, "You bitch. You don't have any right to keep us here. Just wait until my mother hears about this and the rest of the civilian council hears about this." Washu told the foolish Pinkett, who went pale when she heard the last part, yeah, they have no power over me. I am a shinobi of this village. They are not Hokage," recalling that the Pinkett had a close familial relationship with the Hokage before her. Washu simply smiles more broadly at her triumph. The girl simply nodded in response to Washu's commands, saying, "Now Karen, step into the chamber. I'll begin my test." Karen enters the room and blinks as the glass door closes, securing her place inside. The second exam's last day. When Naruto awoke in his own room, he glanced around at the 2 other vacant beds. He scowled a little. He told himself, "I kind of miss them." He shook his head to get rid of those ideas. He sighs. He tells himself, they are not ready for these exams. They are not ready for this life. After taking a shower and getting out of bed, he went outside to the cafeteria hallway and saw Ino sitting by himself while Shikamaru and Choji were heading to the table. With his morning ramen in hand, Naruto approaches her and yells, "Hey Ino-chan." As she watched him sit across from her, Ino said, "Morning Naruto-kun." She asked him, "How are you this morning?" Naruto smiled brightly and told her, "I'm fine. I'm just eager to see what will happen today." "Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm nervous about moving on to the next stage of the exams," he replied to Ino, looking at him with a hint of shyness and anxiety. Choji put his heaping plate down and said, "Hey Naruto." Taking a seat beside Ino. Shikamaru grinned lazily and said, "Troublesome, hey Naruto." He takes a seat. Naruto winks at Ino, causing her to blush a little as he laughs at their antics. The humidity that clung to the chilly stone of the tower's interior was not as heavy as the tension that hung in the air. Feeling a slight tremor of anticipation coursing through his body, Naruto flexed his fingers. Those around him had bruises like badges of survival, and others had bandages, their faces a mixture of hardened resolve and exhaustion. The cautious looks that were exchanged throughout the temporary stadium were a testament to the fact that each ninja had struggled and scraped to get this far. He looked around the crowd, identifying both strangers and people he knew. Every group and every person had a tale written in perspiration and perseverance. Naruto sensed the pressure building, a tacit assurance that there would be no mercy in the next trial. Enko was correct. As his gaze swept over the other test takers, he thought to himself, this portion of the exam was going to cut the exams by half or more. The proctors set the scene for the challenge that would soon start by moving quickly around with unreadable faces. Somewhere, in the far corner, Akunoichi steadied herself for whatever lay ahead by adjusting her Hitai-8 with trembling hands. A senior examiner entered the central platform, and everyone's attention was drawn to the sound of their footsteps. The time had come for Naruto and the others to face a new test that would require all of their remaining strength. There was no time to waste as the last portion of the second stage passed quickly, with a sense of urgency permeating every step. With the announcement of a single, valuable month, the proctors distributed the winning teams. A grace period. Before the final test that would determine their fates, they had 30 days to recuperate, train, and push themselves. There was little fanfare when the matchups were announced, but the results were significant. When Naruto saw his name on the bracket, paired with Neji Hyuga for the opening round, his heart leapt. As the others were revealed, there was a buzz of murmurs throughout the crowd. Seto would take on the mysterious sand wielder Gaara. Kankuro would take on Shino. Shikamaru, ever the reluctant strategist, would take on Tamari, and Dosu's future was uncertain, as he would either face Gaara or the winner of the second round. Every pairing promised a fierce battle, and every name carried a challenge. Each competitor would need to forge the resolve necessary to stand alone in the arena during the crucible-like month that lay ahead. For the time being, the hallways of the tower were empty, with each ninja leaving in silence, their hopes and fears following. The force of Naruto's conviction caused his knuckles to turn pale as he gripped his fist. I will be prepared for the third section of the test. He silently vowed. Nothing is going to stop me, as he locked eyes with Gaara across the dispersing crowd. The world briefly shrank, a corridor of icy intent running between them, dotted with all the whispers and warnings that surrounded the Shukaku host. Naruto resisted allowing fear to grow, even though the One-Tail's vessel was a mystery, a shadow tainted with rumor and dread. With their names intertwined by fate and the cruel design of the test, he was aware that Seto would be the one competing against Gaara in the bracket. However, Naruto saw right through the proctors and paperwork to the important stuff. Gaara's eyes were rimmed with longing and insomnia, and they were focused on something deeper than Seto. It was an unquenchable desire for approval, for the silent approval of a mother who haunted every drop of blood he spilled. The fact that Seto was next in line for Gaara's storm didn't bother Naruto because he knew, in a way that few others could, that the sand wielder's real struggle lay deep beneath the surface. Seto was not a barrier, but a stepping stone. In the lonesome chamber where the One-Tail whispered and promised power, the fight seemed to Gaara like just another sacrifice, another echo. Naruto faced a clear challenge that required him to remain resolute, reject hopelessness, and control his own fate. Naruto's determination grew stronger as the tower drained and the pressure of 30 days mounted. Not only would the final exam determine their rank, but it would also test their core identity and their capacity to withstand both human and non-human monsters. Naruto was unable to turn around or flee the shadows that were getting closer and closer. In order to show Gaara and himself that survival meant more than blood and that hope could lift even the most ingrained curses, he would confront them head-on, fists ready, heart burning. It wasn't until a drop of blood ran down his wrist, shocking him from the intensity of his silent vow, that he realized how tightly his fist was clenched. Sharp but familiar, the pain was a physical reflection of the pressure that was building inside of him. Naruto. The soft yet firm voice broke through the charged atmosphere. Ryoko moved to stand next to him, her eyes brimming with generations of unspoken wisdom. She felt the chaos swirling beneath her grandson's tense lines as she peered down at him. Naruto turned, the edges of his resolve softening into a tentative smile that attempted, but failed, to dispel the darkness in his eyes. He answered, "Yeah, Grandma," in a soft, almost childlike tone that served as a compass in the midst of his accumulating storms. Ryoko's eyes remained fixed, She was aware that words alone couldn't ease the burden he carried and knew better than to press him for answers he wasn't prepared to provide. With a low voice and a subdued promise of support in every word, she questioned, "Are you ready to head back and get ready for the finals?" The finals would be remembered by the village long after the dust had settled, and there was no doubting the seriousness of what lay ahead. With a slight smile that persisted, Naruto nodded and let the tension and blood leave his fist. "Yeah, I will be." The response and affirmation served as a link between hope and fear. With Ryoko at his side, he could gather the pieces of himself for what lay ahead, resolved to confront the darkness and show them that hope, once ignited, could outshine despair.
So this was it for the series. I hope you enjoyed it. To watch more series like this, subscribe to my channel. Till then, we weeb offline.